Good evening, and welcome to the March 10th, 2021 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I'm Rosemary Kerr, Chairman of the Commission. This meeting will be conducted remotely in compliance with Governor's Executive Order 2020-07, issued on March 16, 2020, that suspended certain Open Meetings Act provisions relating to in-person attendance by members of a public body. The governor's order suspends the requirement in section 2.01 that members of a public body must be physically present. And it suspends the limitations in section 7 on when remote participation is allowed. Members of the public can view the meeting by following the public audience link, which is included on the meeting agenda available on the city's website. This meeting is also being broadcast on cable TV channel 17. Please go to the newly improved City of Lake Forest website, where the link to meeting agendas is on the homepage. Public testimony is welcome, and members of the public who wish to testify during the public comment portions of the meeting can do so by using the raise hand function on the screen or by calling 847-810-3643. That's 847-810-3643. City staff will be on site at the city's municipal services facility during the meeting. However, the plan commissioners will participate remotely. At this time, I would like to introduce the members of the commission and staff. And please raise your hand as I introduce you, given the Zoom format. Commissioner Freeman, Commissioner Douglas, Commissioner Athenson, Commissioner Moorhead, Commissioner Artman-Ruggles, and Commissioner Dixon has recused himself from this evening's agenda item and is therefore not in attendance. Representing the city is Kathy Cerniak, Director of Community Development. Due to the length of the January meeting, consideration of the minutes of January 13, 2021 Plan Commission meeting will be postponed until the next meeting. We do, however, have consideration of the minutes of the February 10th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting. Does any commission member have any comments or corrections on the February 10, 2021 meeting minutes?
Chairman, I just have a quick spelling notation. What page is this? I don't even know what page it is. 1, 2, 3, page 4, first paragraph. It said she stated in her opinion underground or staked parking. I think that's supposed to be stacked, right? Okay.
We will make that correction.
Thank you. And that's it.
Any other comments or corrections? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the February 10, 2021 Plan Commission meeting?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving and accepting these minutes of the February 10, 2021 Plan Commission meeting, please say aye, and we'll need a roll call vote.
Yes, I'll take the roll call vote.
Okay.
Commissioner Douglas? Commissioner Moorhead?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Commissioner Athenson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
And Chairman Kerr?
Aye.
Thank you. 6 yeas, no nays. Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our agenda item, continuation of a public hearing, consideration of a remand from the City Council, and commission action. Consideration of approvals related to the third and final phase of the McKinley Road multifamily plan development. The petition requests a zone change from R1 to GR3 for a 38-foot wide strip of land along the western edge of property addressed as 373 East Westminster. A special use permit, a tentative plat of consolidation, and approval of the overall site plan. A 2-story condominium building is proposed with underground parking. The property proposed for development is located to the east of the condominium building. We okay on transmission? The property proposed for development is located to the east of the condominium buildings addressed as 705, 723, and 727 McKinley Road on the south side of East Westminster. Property owners are 373 EW LLC, Todd Altunian, managing member, and Peter Whitmer, member. Also 361 Westminster LLC, Peter Whitmer and Todd Altunian, members, and final property owner, City of Lake Forest. Applicant is Peter Whitmer and Todd Altunian. And before the petitioner begins, do members of the commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter?
Madam Chair, I have 3 ex parte contacts I would just want to disclose. I received 2 voicemails from Rami Lopat, one on January 14th and one on February 12th. I don't know Ms. Lopat. To my knowledge, I've never spoken to her, but I took the voicemails and forwarded them to city staff in case they wanted to follow up directly. And then I received an email from Kate Zimlick on January 14th. I know Kate through Cub Scouts. Our sons are in Cub Scouts together. She sent me a short email saying she appreciated my time serving on a city commission, and that was the extent of it. Notwithstanding those 3 contacts, I still feel confident I can review this in an impartial, objective way and decide in the same way.
All right, and thank you for those disclosures.
Chairman Kerr, I had a phone conversation. I had a phone call yesterday from Rami Lopat, and we had a brief conversation. She asked me if I knew the formula by which the number of units per acre were calculated for the development, and specifically whether or not the road would be included in the lot area when making that calculation. And I did not know the answer to that question. Subsequently, I spoke with Kathy Cerniak about it and was reminded and remembered from a couple of years ago that this being a planned development had its own pre-designated number of units, maximum number of units designated by the city council. And as similar to Commissioner Moore, that I will not be, I can still judge everything objectively tonight, despite that conversation. And that's the extent of my ex parte communications.
And thank you also for those disclosures. Does any other commission member have anything to add? Then we will proceed. At this time, I'd like to ask staff to promote the petitioner's representative, Peter Whitmer, and other representatives who intend to address the commission to the panel so that we can swear in all presenters at one time.
Chairman, they're there if you'd like to swear them in.
Okay, thank you. So that's Mr. Whitmer and Mr. Mariani? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give or have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do. I do.
Thank you. Mr. Whitmer, please proceed. And once again, to any member of the public who would like to speak on this matter during the public comment period, the call-in number is 847-810-3643. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to present our project again. I just want to say a few words in the beginning. I have Mr. Mariani with me to say a few words about the landscape and his thoughts about that. We're back to you. What may appear to be a similar proposal as the last time we were in front, but I think there are some changes that we made based on the comments that we got, not only here at the Planning Commission, but also comments that we got from the City Council, and also from staff and from emails and other outside sources. And I think, that's been the process for this really from the beginning of the development. I think that we have listened. I know that there's a lot of people involved and there's a lot of ideas thrown at us. And I really feel like what we've come up with is the best solution for this project. And I realize there's a lot of personalities and not everybody's going to be satisfied to what they want, but we try to look at it objectively and really come up with the best solutions. I'm going to start, this is the 2 site plans with the reduction in the overall footprint of our building. We at the last Planning Commission, we became aware that the rear, the little where we were having the zoning variation piece setback in the rear yard, that could be construed as a rear yard setback, and that made a lot of sense to me. And so that we eliminated the building in that location. And I think that not only did a nice job of making the building smaller, but it also had an opportunity for us to put a larger tree in that corner and have it ability to grow and really soften the building in that and have a better outside space for the unit that's inside there, so that the patio has a bigger outdoor space for that, which was a benefit for reducing the overall scale of that. The other thing that we looked at and more recently have, I know that the Planning Commission got an updated packet. We studied how to make the buildings smaller in width. And that was a comment that came out in this meeting, and also, the idea with the Planning Commission meeting that, how to make the building appear to be smaller and actually physically be smaller. So what we were able to do was we looked at the basement, and it's critical that we have a number of parking spaces. So we have 20 originally, and then we don't eliminate very many parking spaces. But the blue area that we're showing here is the space that we could make smaller. So we're able to narrow the building by 8'6" wide and give that space then back without, there was only one net loss of parking spaces. We're able to move the trash area over here and then pick up a parking space, and so that we still have 19 spaces as opposed to 20. And then we just have a smaller storage space. So I think that what that does is allowed us to have, as opposed to 15 feet on the side yard setback here, increase that to 23.5 feet in the corners, and then have 25 feet from the property line to the east to the main face of the body of the building for that. So we think that that's a significant move. I will show you in the perspectives how that works too, for a lot of reasons. One is the drainage swale that we're creating between the 2 buildings, and the storm sewer that goes in between that we're implementing. The ability to put larger landscape in there, and for that landscape to have area to grow in spacing. And the space then between the new structure or the new home that will be designed for the 373 Westminster site. The other thing that we did in the studying was the front yard setback, and really trying to understand how that works. We studied, I know this is a Planning Commission, not the HPC, but we really wanted to think about how the components of the front elevation related to the other houses, and how to minimize that and have it not only relate to the residential, but relate to the rest of our development. And one of the things that we originally had was a porch element that was a second story in an enclosed area that went across the whole piece. And as we narrowed this up, we felt like it made a lot of sense to reduce the size of that porch by 1/3. So the blue area is now open. The other thing, we had brick piers at the corners of those, and after studying that, we think that that doesn't really make any sense, and so that this would all be a metal structure in black, so that really the face of the building would be back here, and then that would be, we've increased the setback to the porch of 50 feet just because of the corner now is not at the corner, and the edge of the building is at 61 to the property line and 62 at the other corner. The other thing I would just mention is that now, you know, this width is I think, let me go to the next page. The overall width of the building is about 82 feet on the face of this together, and that by having this shifted, we have really more space to the west and then more space in between the east property too. The other thing I think in the front yard that I want to note is, while it's important to understand the property line, the setback, it's really important to understand from where the curb is of the pavement to the building, because that's really what you see in 3 dimensions. So we've related those to the surrounding properties. And you see the 333 Westminster's face is actually 50 feet, although its steps and everything are closer. The 351 is 36 feet. And then we jump back to our building, which is 71 at the porch and 82 and 84 at the building here. And then this would be the proposed section. You can see across the street, they're similar to the 86, 89, 80, 99. And then it steps closer as you move west. The other thing I would note would be that our main building is really aligned with the body of the 333 Westminster building, so that these portions that are sticking forward are out as the 351 building, and then our background building is really set back basically to the rear of the 351 so that it can get views out. Its space is allowed for that. I wanted to bring Frank Mariani, who's been integral into the project, the whole development since the beginning, and just to say a few words about the design and how it fits into the context of the historic district and the open spaces that we've created on either end of this project. So Frank, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for your time. I appreciate all of your efforts, and I guess that's the reason why Lake Forest is so special. We're all in it together. We've been involved, as Peter said, from the very beginning, and going back to phase 1 at 723 McKinley, phase 2 at 705. And if you think about those, and if you've seen that landscape, it speaks to Western Avenue or McKinley Avenue, excuse me, and that vocabulary. And that's what's important, really important here along Westminster. I mean, what we've heard and people's concern, quite frankly, is making sure that the transition from downtown Lake Forest to the beautiful single-family homes as you go east is a smooth, easy transition. And quite frankly, the 2-story, the height of this building made that, I don't want to say easy, but really not very hard to accomplish. If you think about it, I bet you everybody that's listening to my conversation has gone up and down Westminster millions of times. And with, I've paid extra attention along with my team. As you travel from west to east right now, the arborvitaes, large arborvitaes that are at the 333 Westminster building, quite frankly, will screen our building out. It screens the neighbor that's in between our 2 buildings, does a beautiful job of that, and it will actually screen out ours. The other thing, there are 2 existing trees on our property that we're going to do everything possible to make sure that they are healthy and thriving. And we're going to add additional very large scale trees to bring down the scale and to keep what would be a traditional historic front yard in Lake Forest. That's what we're trying to recreate. We believe that large expanse of turf and those large trees will do exactly that. And it'll blend in beautiful, and wouldn't make a difference, quite frankly, if it was in fact a 2-story home or a 2-story building. The other thing that we've done, Peter took, some of my thunder, but by narrowing that building on the east side of the building, it is a big deal when you pick up an extra 8 to 10 feet in planting space. Because not only can you plant larger plant material from the get-go, but it has a chance to grow and mature in a natural shape instead of butchering it and holding everything back. And that's important to Mariani Landscape. Something else that I think is special as a member of the community, but is the pedestrian walk between Westminster and the library. And the pocket park that we've created on the far south of the property. That expanse is the same size, just to give you a feeling, of the turf at Market Square. So it's going to be a lovely place, accessible to all the public, a place where somebody could go to the library, grab a book, come back in this beautiful space, enjoy a book. It's really, really special. So I think that both Todd and Peter have really addressed the concerns that neighbors have. I think our landscape plan does exactly what we wanted to do. And that is, quite frankly, that transition, historic complement to what's been done in Lake Forest, throughout Lake Forest. And that's it.
All right, thanks, Frank. Next, I just wanted to go through the streetscape, and these are all been in your packet, and I'm going to try to pick up my pace here because I realize we're probably running a little bit long. This is the streetscape. This was the original one, which had our face of the elevation at the 60-foot 2-inch width. And then this will be our revised one, which the face is actually 51.6. And we think that that's a pretty big difference. You can see then the other comparisons of the other properties. And I've got some more examples of that later that I want to show you. The other is the height. I think that while we feel strongly that the 2-story scheme is a much stronger scheme in terms of the context of stepping down from the 3-story condominiums and the bank, actually the bank building and Market Square, the condominiums buildings, and then coming to our building and then the single family house. It makes sense to step it down. It also makes sense to step it down in terms of the eastern properties that we don't seem to talk about quite as much. The existing condo buildings and its relationship, our phase 1 building, and also the property to the east, to the southeast of us. The difference between having a 3-story structure there and a 2-story structure, I think, is pretty substantial, basically a third difference. And also, too, I think Frank made a good point that the trees that we plant have a much better scale and relationship to the 2-story versus the 3-story. I put this dashed line in here, which is the height of our parapet, which you can show then, it's the same height as the 401 building house. It's basically the height of the 353 building, then goes along in the 2-story pieces of Westminster. It cuts across there, and then you can see the relationship of Market Square. We go across the street and basically eclipse the roofs. This is the property directly across the street to 360, which were basically at the same height of width. So I just wanted to show that. This is without the line. And then the relationship of the buildings to the 333 building. As I said here, the 2-story height pieces, there's a 2-story piece at either end, which our height really matches up with a house. 30 feet, 32 feet, 29 feet, the same height. The window fenestrations are similar. Then this is just some of the houses in the area. This is the 401 building, which ours is slightly narrower and actually is the same height for that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the components of the elevation. So not only the height, the overall height and width of it, but its pieces and how they fit together. A lot of the compositions of the houses have a body to it, a gable end, and then a porch element on that. And what we have done with this elevation is taken those same pieces, which are the kit parts that make up our other buildings, and that we have the body of the building, we have the bay at the end, which is slightly protruding, and then we have the porch element that is in the center. So I think it has the same scale breakdown of the residential components of all these. I did throw in the 404 East Deer Path home, which is, not all the historic homes have pitched roofs on them. And so I think that's an example, which is next to the library, which doesn't have that. And you can see the scale of that is very similar to the scale of our Westminster elevation. This is where the perspectives is what we really study and we really think about in terms of how it fits into the context, because you can look at a site plan and try to guess at how all the things together, but this really makes a difference. So one of the things that we did in the modification of the site plan since we have been back in front of the board was to add a tree here. And it was one of the things that we felt like when you're moving east, so that there's actually, Frank had talked about the large arborvitaes here, which block our building. There is the front yard of the 353 building, and then this existing large tree, and there's an existing large tree behind here. But we feel like a large tree in this piece will really block the view of the face through as you're moving east. I show the black and white, and then I show the colors on these, just because the colors really hide the building, and it's hard to distinguish exactly what the shapes of the buildings are. So this is the colored version of that. These two show the variation between the narrowing building. So this is cutting this back and having a single bay of this. This would be if you're basically halfway down the driveway of the neighbor. So it's further back, but I just wanted to show you the relationship of the 353 house and how it sits out in the face and really relates to the setback of the houses on this side. And then that the face of the body of this building is actually back at the body of our building. So this is Premier. This, you can see the alley of trees that are here. And then we have the alley that's going down along the drive going back. And then you can see the dome of the library beyond. I think you can see the front landscape and how it will tie in with that. This is the color version of that. Again, for you to look at. This is just a little bit closer, which again, here we studied, these are these brick piers on the corner of the porch, which don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And so what we did was we cut that piece back. And so that we just have this as all the black piece so that you just see the brick beyond that. Again, the trees, then picking up the alley, going down the library behind. This is the relationship of these two buildings together, as you can see. And at the front door of these are off of this street. It does not face onto Westminster. Again, reinforcing the idea that this is the multifamily piece. And as you turn the corner, you turn into the single family piece. And again, the space between the 351, which is pretty close to the road, and then that we step this back and we have this open space and we're able to get more space and move that in. Our ramp down into the garage is hidden behind this landscape and nestled back behind there. Again, the color version of that. This is looking going west on Westminster. So really the prominent piece here is the house at the 351 house on the corner will be the primary. You'll see the lawn piece. Our building is back here. And then again, these larger trees in the front landscape will be the largest piece of the character of that. The color version of that. And then just a couple other points I just wanted to make was the zoning modifications that we're asking for. They are contiguous to what the existing zoning is. So our site is surrounded and it's a transition. So there are the 3 condominium buildings next to it, the library and the church, all are on the one side with a single family on the other side. So it is truly the transition, and it is not a gerrymandered type situation that we're asking for. And that this community, as you drive down here, really is one on this side, as we have looked at this in its relationship to the streetscape in Westminster, its relationship to the houses in the back on this that are behind here, and its relationship between these two. And I think one of the things that have really reinforced us the two-story scheme is that really it's this piece that, you know, is its impact on the existing condominiums, and this is the difference between the two and the three-story scheme. And I just really wanted to do a quick update on the values of houses. There's been quite a discussion on that, and I just wanted to, we actually have really good news for that in a housing market that has really picked up in Lake Forest, which is really exciting. We have a couple of sales that have happened since our last meeting. This is a slide that I showed you, and we went through, and I won't go through in great detail, all the single family houses and their houses pricing, and that they've actually increased in value over time and are at less price than what our sales prices are been. But the two sales that have happened have been one in the second floor of the south east corner, and one in the first floor on the southwest corner. The one in the southwest increased from 2017 about $100,000, and it closed in August of 2020 on that. And the one in the second floor, which would look over this, actually was sold on February of last year for $700,000, and it was listed for $849,000 and had multiple offers and is pending closing on that. So you can see that the increase values of the immediate neighbors to this has actually increased in value. So I just wanted to give you some information that is the actual numbers of things and not just hypotheticals of what if kind of situations. The other thing I would mention is the 4 houses in the Swift property are now in the process of being designed and approved. And so, you know, I think the values of those, their lots are a little under $1 million, plus the cost of their houses is probably $1 million, $1 or $2 million. So, you know, well over $2 million houses will be built here, and that our replacement structure will be somewhat of a similar type value, which again will be higher than the value of the homes in the surrounding areas. So, you know, I just wanted to update on that. In conclusion, I just wanted to say I really do appreciate everybody's input on this, and we do listen to everything that everybody says, and I think we've come up with a better plan. I think that, you know, when Art Miller told me, you know, this really needs to be more in keeping with the other 2 buildings and how the scale fits, and another planning commission or another HPC member said, you know, could you do a 2-story building? And I think, you know, we are looking for possibilities to do those things, and we have continually worked on this, and we really feel like this is by far the best solution that we've come up with. And, you know, we've been at this a long time, and I think it's paid off. You know, I think, you know, people say, well, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continually work at it. I agree with that, and I think we will continually work at it in terms of, you know, positioning things. But I think the solution that we are proposing today is one that fits in the context. I think I've given you the numbers, the mathematics of the setbacks, the mathematics of the heights, the mathematics of the distances between buildings. And it's just not adjectives of words of it just doesn't fit in. It just doesn't. They are equal. So they are the same numbers. So, you know, I think it is not a single family house, and we did not set out to do that. And I think the original ideas were not about that, but I do think it makes this transition from Western Avenue into the single family in an elegant way. The other thing I think is the pedestrian and the access for people to walk through this community we're seeing it now, even though we're still under construction. And I think that when this thing all gets completed, it will be really a jewel within the CBD. The last thing I would say is, you know, I do understand we have been building for a long time, and neighbors are fed up with us in terms of the construction process, and I do feel for them. And we try to minimize everything. We are always open to hear suggestions of making things less impactful. I personally go around and pick up trash and make sure things are locked up and done up and all that we possibly can, but we are human and we are building things. So we do apologize, and we will continue to work with people to try to minimize the impact and really would love to get this project finished. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Whitmer. And now, for the way Plan Commission operates, for those listening in who may not be familiar, we have identification of issues by staff, and that will be followed by questions or requests for clarification from the commission members to the petitioner or staff. And public testimony is later on. Kathy Cerniak from Community Development, would you please identify the issues for us?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Kerr, members of the commission. I'm going to try hard not to repeat the comments I've made. I know that all of you are very familiar with this petition. You first started studying this third and final phase of this development in September of 2019. What I'd like to do is focus on 3 areas. First, why this matter is back before the commission tonight. Second, the role of the city in reviewing this petition. And third, the charge of the commission tonight. So why is this petition back before the commission? On January 13th, you considered this petition for the 5th time. And that was the first time that a request for a zone change for a portion of the lot to the east was included in the request. At the conclusion of that meeting, the commission seemed to be seeking some direction from the city council on whether the zone change should in fact be considered, whether the zone change had any merit. And in order to get that direction from the city council, the Plan Commission in a 3-2 vote voted to recommend denial of the zone change and denial of the plat of consolidation. The Plan Commission did not consider the entire project, the special use permit, which would incorporate approval of the overall site plan, really because of the interest in getting some input from the city council on the zone change itself. So as you know, the Plan Commission is a recommending body to the city council. The Plan Commission is advisory only. Any action that the Plan Commission takes is not final. So whether a recommendation is in support of a project, in support of a request, or recommending denial of a request, that recommendation goes forward to the city council. That process was followed. The city council on February 1st held at a public meeting considered the recommendation from the Plan Commission to deny the zone change. As with any recommendation that the city council receives from a board or commission, the city council has several options. To accept the recommendation. In this case, that would have meant the city council would have taken action to deny the zone change, take that off the table, take it out of the picture. The council could have voted to overturn the Plan Commission's recommendation and approve the zone change. It would be unusual for the city council to approve a zone change without concurrently approving the development plan. Historically, the city has approved zone changes only concurrent with a plan to assure certainty that going forward, they know what will result from that zone change. And third, the city council has the option to remand a matter back to a board or commission. On February 1st, the city council voted unanimously 8-0 to remand this matter, the question of the zone change, back to the Plan Commission with direction to the Plan Commission to reconsider the zone change. Why did the city council remand? the city council traditionally has paid great deference to the work of the boards and commissions. They recognize that in this case, the Plan Commission has been studying this petition since September of 2019. Again, the city council could have, if they felt strongly, could have simply denied the zone change. They did not do that. In order to provide some direction and some explanation really of the remand, the city council adopted a resolution which was included at the front of your packet and was also available on the city's website. That resolution started by laying out some history, just reviewing some of the facts of this petition and the discussions to date. But importantly, the resolution also laid out some direction to the Plan Commission without constraining the Plan Commission to a specific site plan or a decision. But in summary, that direction included in the resolution directed that the Plan Commission recognize that this is a multi-phased project and that it was anticipated. It has always been anticipated that the city property would be incorporated into this development as part of the third and final phase. The resolution directs that the Plan Commission remain consistent with your past deliberations on this petition and your past direction to the petitioner. In December of 2020, the Plan Commission on a 6-0 vote affirmed that the plan presented at that time, which was multifamily residential, at that time it was a 3-story building, that plan, that concept, that overall development was consistent with the adopted master plan. Third, the resolution directed the commission to consider the requested zone change of the 38-foot parcel of land in the context of the opportunity it provides to achieve a 2-story as opposed to a 3-story building on this transition parcel. Fourth, the resolution directed the commission to take advantage of the opportunity to improve upon the existing conditions in this area. This property has long, we've often heard it referred to as a gap in the streetscape. There really isn't any certainty to this parcel and hasn't been for many years. It doesn't provide a graceful transition from the larger buildings along McKinley to the single family homes, both to the north and to the east. And it doesn't make a statement at the entrance to the historic district. The resolution also directed the Plan Commission to work to achieve the best possible transition on this site. Again, as you move from those larger to smaller buildings. Second topic I wanted to focus on is to speak briefly to the role of the city. It has been noted by many that the city really is wearing 2 hats in this petition. The city owns the property and the city is the regulatory body. This is not unusual and it is not improper. The city was in the same position when redevelopment of the former municipal services building was considered. The city is in the same position when special use permits or amendments to those permits come forward for Ragdale or Orton Community Center or other city-owned properties. The city may someday be in that position as we look at some of the city-owned expansive surface public parking lots. It is likely that at some time in the future, there may be opportunities to see some redevelopment there. The burden to establish the case for this petition is on the developer, not on the city. However, it is the city's role to evaluate what is presented, to evaluate the various iterations that have come forward based on adopted plans, policies, special studies, and code provisions. And also to consider what's presented in the context of previous discussions and direction from the Plan Commission and from the city, and based on previous actions by the City Council. In the case of this petition, there was a master plan and development parameters approved by the City Council that spoke to this parcel. The master plan was conceptual. It didn't set out a specific site plan, but it did talk about phased development. It did incorporate this property. It did envision multifamily housing on this property. It did envision underground parking and really enhancing the streetscape. And the third aspect I wanted to mention, and just very quickly, your charge tonight, the commission's charge tonight, is to reconsider the zone change. The city council directed that you step back and take a fresh look at that and reconsider that zone change in the context of the applicable criteria detailed in the code. Those criteria and findings as prepared by staff are found on pages 4 and 5 of your staff report. Second, the Plan Commission is charged tonight with considering the request for a special use permit, which would incorporate approval of the overall site plan and approval of the plat of consolidation. Findings for the special use permit are also detailed in the city code. They are also provided in your staff report along with findings prepared by staff. And those criteria are addressed and those findings are set forth on pages 6, 7, and 8 of your staff report. With that, Chairman Kerr, I will conclude my comments, certainly available to answer questions as they come up throughout the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we move to the portion of the program where we have questions and requests for clarification from the commission members to petitioner or staff. And we will begin with Commissioner Freeman.
Thank you, Chair Kerr. My question is for Peter. Peter, I was glad that in the last meeting, you presented some property values, recent sales, and the additional information you provided this evening is also very helpful. I think what I also liked about the previous meeting was that you showed photos of what was there before phases 1 and 2, those rather unsightly, dated properties, including the office buildings, as well as the city property, and the condition of those properties prior to our approval of the master plan, and certainly prior to the development, the building of phases 1 and 2. I think we have recency bias, at play to some extent, that now that we have these 2 nice buildings instead of what was there before, let's just stop. And I just wonder, we're now adding, expanding a little bit. And I think to the city's point, the city council, Kathy mentioned it, sent this back to us saying that the zone change would create multiple opportunities. And one of those opportunities, in addition to the 2-story building, another opportunity was the redevelopment of the adjacent property. So, you talked about the office buildings and what was there before, but now, at least in the council's view, there's an opportunity with this single family residence being built. And I wondered if you could just speak a little bit to, in respect to the Donovans who we've met throughout these hearings, who were the prior owners of the home. It looked to me like a 1960s era, maybe perhaps colonial, and the Donovans were very clear about multiple problems of drainage. I wonder if you could just speak to that opportunity and what it does in providing, again, a further transition. We go from 3 stories to 2 stories, and then there'll be a brand new single family home as opposed to what was there before. Can you speak a little bit to, what was there before and what this project can do to improve the Westminster side?
Sure. So there was a lot of problems. Well, the Donovans were very vocal about the problems that they had on their existing site, and we tried to, we were aware of them, and we tried to solve them and work with them to alleviate mainly water problems in that they had, prior to us even starting this, they had achieved a demolition permit and a replacement structure for their house. So they were planning, and they got approved by the Historical Preservation Commission to demolish the house and build a new structure and a new home there. So the value of that house is really, I mean, the problem was it was somewhat of an interesting history in that house. It was built for the person's daughter who he lived behind it and wanted to have his daughter close to him. Unfortunately, from the original construction, it was probably set 2 feet too low. So, everything kind of drains to that and drains around it. So they have to do a lot of issues resolving from water. And so by us being able to redevelop the site and get the infrastructure, provide a storm line basically along the west end of it, we're able to pick up the water, not only improve the current drainage situation for the house to the south of that, and do that, we can then raise the new house up to a certain height, and really have it more in the character of the neighborhood with a new designed home. We did not take the approach initially that we would just sort of show a blank site. We have actually designed massing models of probably 3 different layouts so that were comfortable with the ability to design a new house in that, and that we would have a driveway situation and all those things that we could were manageable. I think our thoughts are that there's the popularity of the location and the site itself. We have not marketed it, but we've had numerous people. We had actually one person was very interested. Unfortunately, had gotten COVID and really wasn't able to move forward. But we would look forward to designing a home there for somebody as opposed to a spec house. But I think, whether it be a spec house or for somebody, I think it can fit in the context of the historic district and really marry the two together, marry our landscape together with their landscape so that they're in a coordinated effort as opposed to, one just doing one and then us doing something else.
Yeah, and that house would be subject to review by the Historic Preservation Commission as well.
Same process.
Can we go back to the water main for just a minute? Because the idea of adding this, I think, would be significant for an individual homeowner, and making it part of this project maybe improves. I mean, you mentioned the property to the south. It not only will alleviate the problems at 373 to the east, but you're also, does that line extend further south and benefit the other property owner as well?
Correct. There's a water issue that there's a pipe that comes out basically in the middle of the property to the south, which is the storm line comes from the east and comes over and dumps into his yard and then pulls up. So our plans is to pick that up and pick that water up in this storm line, and then that would continue south. So we'd be able to solve those issues. And I realized that the property owner there is currently wasn't excited about our project, and I understand that. And we've been not only working with them in terms of we've tried to work with them and have talked to them numerous times, and but I think by regrading and fixing those water issues, plus providing and cleaning up their landscape and fencing and all those sorts of things that we can do to that property, really improve a situation that isn't great. I mean, prior to this development, they basically had a parking lot in the Masonic building right up to their property line. So, I think this is quite an improvement to that situation. And really, they don't have they're kind of landlocked to solve their water situation unless we do this. They have to go through somebody else's property to get to it. There is no easement going through this. And we would create a drainage easement through this for that storm line for that. So I think it's
one last question then, and then the single family home. So again, as we transition from 3 to 2 to the single family home, that home will have all of the setbacks that are required under the ordinances.
That will make its current zoning, correct?
Okay.
In the lot area, yes.
Any
That's
other
all I have.
questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Douglas.
Okay, question for Mr. Whitmer. Peter, I know you and Frank both talked about the landscaping on the east side benefiting from your 8-foot move. I get that, except that now that you own 373, you could plant probably whatever you wanted somehow straddling the line if you didn't increase setback. But since you have increased the setback, did you consider decreasing the amount of zoning change that you would ask for? And then just put the landscaping on the other side of the property line?
You know, we would be open to that idea because we control both properties.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it's a little bit of a moot point in terms of overall fitting in the context of the district and the distance between the unit, you know, the things. But yeah, we could, I mean, there would not be much difference in terms of moving our property line or our easement 8 feet to minimize it from 8 feet, you know, going that direction.
And then my second question is in the context of the remand from City Council relating to density. Do you happen to know the density of phase 1 and 2 combined in terms of units per acre as compared to the proposed density of phase 3?
I don't know that I have those numbers. It's about boy, I don't know that right off the top of my. I know it's less in coverage on the footprint, but I just don't know unit per acre. I don't have that number. I'd have to do the math on that.
Thanks.
We,
That's all
we
I have.
can, we can calculate that for you in the next few minutes.
Oh, okay, great. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Monica Artman Ruggles.
Kathy, I just wanted to clarify that the footprint that Peter is proposing tonight varies from the package that we all received earlier, and that this is the first time that we're seeing the reduced footprint as well as the public.
This does vary. The footprint has continued to be refined to get smaller. This was distributed to the Plan Commission in a follow-up packet.
Okay. I don't think I got that. So, okay, so I have a couple questions for you then. The development is requesting a departure from the allowable number of dwelling units per our zoning code. So, you know, reading in Peter's statement, I guess our code allows 6 units, but they're requesting 8. So because of that, if they are granted that request, is that basically implying that they can build a larger footprint and more density on the parcel?
This is a plan development. So the parameters for the plan development were set forth early in the process. Again, recognizing a multi-phased project, which allowed up to 14 units on the phase 3 property. And as you look at a plan development, you look at the overall site and calculate the density of the overall parcel. And the density allowed on all 3 phases of this property is about 30 units per acre. So the overall density, whether the phase 3 is at 6 units or 8 units, is below the density that was approved as part of the plan development.
Okay, so they're not asking for any kind of special departure from our zoning code?
No.
Okay.
Again, this is a plan development, requires a special use permit to be approved. It's not authorized by right, but this is consistent with the provisions that were set forth in the plan development as originally envisioned.
Okay, and then additionally to that, the statement also implies that they're requesting a departure for the allowable footprint on that parcel, with the footprint being 30%, and we're asking for 33.5%, something like that.
I believe this reduced footprint complies with the 30%. And again, through a plan development process, there is the ability, as the Plan Commission did with, for instance, Oak Knoll subdivision, there is the ability to provide flexibility, but as this is presented, it exceeds all zoning setbacks. And even if we were to consider this as a standalone development, not as part of not as the third phase, the 30% building coverage is satisfied with this plan.
With the reduced width.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, then I guess my other questions, I have a few questions. So for Peter, is it fair to say that by adding on the additional 37 feet from the 373 property, that you've basically increased the width by 30%? And so you're expanding that front elevation by an additional 30% from the original master plan?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess what I would look at, and I think you can see it here, is that, so our width to the face here, we basically is the same width as the building. So we basically have slid over the width of the front and jogged it and had more space to the west. So I would say no. That it's approximately the same width as what the rest of the building is to the south.
Okay, well, looking at it from Westminster, I mean, the overall width of the building, what is like, did you say it was like 60 feet across?
Let's see, let me go to that just so we're looking at the same thing. All right. So we're 51'6".
51, okay.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, so then even like looking at that, the streetscape you have up there, you know, the 715 building, you know, is more than, you know, substantially wider than the homes across the street for the most part. And, you know, your spec home, of course, you can do a maximum of those 63 feet or so, but by expanding out towards the east with your, trying to take the additional, area, you're able to expand the width of the building more. And is that so that you could add more development square footage to the property?
I think it's so that we could have more space. Well, one of the things, let's take what you're saying. So the house across the street is 67 feet wide. Ours is directly across. The house to the east of that is 53 feet across. The tighter houses that are close then are 37 foot, 33 foot, 29, and then at the corner is 52. So if you'd average these, they're pretty close to the average of what ours is. The house, obviously, that we're spec, we could build whatever. It could be as wide as 63 feet.
Okay.
The 401 property is 58 feet. So I think it's, those numbers are the same. So it's not wider. I think that we can lay out the parking better underneath for the underground parking, so that we can come in, we can have a double loaded quarter as we can get in, we can get the ramp to fit in and go down easier. And that space allows us to do that. And that the footprint has gotten thicker as it's gone back in that space. So, I guess from that perspective, yes, it has allowed us, but it's allowed us to do a lot of nice things. The other thing is it's allowed us to get more space between the existing house to the west and the face of this. And then also, as it goes back to the east, then we were increasing the space here. So I think, it's just allowed us to do a little bit more and not have it so packed tight onto the west edge of the property next to the existing 351 house.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that you have more space to the west. To the east, it's, I guess it just depends on what happens, at the next lot. So again, like on your 715 on the streetscape, you're not indicating the covered roof structures that I saw on the elevation. Is that correct?
And those are back off of the face.
But even so, those would still be adjacent, to any of the property owners to the east. About how tall are those?
Those will be about, from the top of the parapet, about another 6 feet, because our parapet wall that goes around the 2-story hide all our mechanical equipment, in so that we don't see any of that, and so then it's about 6 feet above that.
Okay, and it also looks like, are you raising the grade at 715? From that drawing, it looks like the grade is raised and it's sloping down towards 373.
And it naturally does, yes.
It naturally does, but wasn't that a problem for the Donovans?
Was it a problem for the Donovans that the grade came, the water? The problem with the Donovans is the water was coming from the south. It came through the south of their property, and a big part of that problem of their water that came through the south was through the pipe that we found in the backyard of the house in the back and came through the backyard. So it really, the water, as we can re-engineer the two sites together, we allow it so that we have a drainage swale between these two properties and really can correct all that. So it's really an opportunity for us to solve that issue by having the two sites.
That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Artman-Ruggles. Commissioner Moorhead.
Thank you. Question for Kathy. Kathy, if the rezoning fails on this 7,225 square feet, doesn't the special use in the plat of consolidation, don't they become moot points because you can't have a multifamily condo in the R1?
Council has asked that the Plan Commission forward a recommendation on the complete request. So we are suggesting that the Plan Commission take action on the zone change in one motion, and then regardless of the outcome of that, also to forward a recommendation to the City Council on the special use permit. And in consultation with the city attorney, she confirmed that we really are obligated to take action on all parts of the request.
Okay. But if we don't do the rezoning, we can go through the factors for the special use, but the multi-unit condo wouldn't, this proposal wouldn't be approved, couldn't be approved.
Keep in mind that the Plan Commission only is an advisory body. So the Plan Commission will forward a recommendation to the City Council on the zoning and a recommendation to the council on the special use permit. The Plan Commission is not taking any final action on the zone change. So by providing the council with a full packet, the council will then be able to take action as they see fit.
Okay. Thank you for that. Peter, I have a question about your application. I've looked at it. I don't think in the written application you spoke to the criteria for the rezoning. Did I miss it, or is it just not there?
I believe we submitted that in the package.
Okay, I don't see the criteria addressed. Okay, let's go through the rezoning criteria, which is what the city council requested. It's in section 159.044 E2 of the city code. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria. For the first one is the zoning classification of the property within the general area of the property in question. The property in question for the rezoning is what we're calling the 38-foot wide strip. It's 7,225 square feet. That's the property in question for the rezoning. I've seen some language in the staff report that kind of ties in the GR3, but with respect to that 38-foot strip, this will be a question for Kathy, but I'll probably ask Peter the same thing. To the northeast of that property, to the northwest of that property, the zone is R1. And to the north of that property, the zone is R1. To the northeast of that property, the zone is R1. To the east of that property, the zone is R1. To the southeast of that property, the zone is R1. To the south of that property, the zone is R1. To the southwest of that property, the zone is GR3. And to the west of that property is GR3. Of those 8 directions, 6 of them are R1 zoning. Is that correct, Kathy?
It is correct in that description, yes.
And Peter, do you agree?
I would concur.
Okay, so that's 75% of the property around this property at issue for the rezoning is R1. The existing uses of property within the general area of the property in question. Again, I don't have to go through the directions, but 75% of that property is residential in the R1. That's criteria B. Criteria C, the suitability of the property in question to the uses permitted under the existing zoning classification. I will note, give me a second. Sorry, dry mouth. In the staff report, Kathy, you added and proposed. So it reads in the staff report for the uses permitted under the existing and proposed zoning. But that's not in the city code, is it, Kathy?
I would have to double check.
Okay. Well, going with the city code, this is section 159.044 E2C. The property in question is still in the R1. And I note that it's had a house on it since 1963. And prior to that, it was part of the 401 property. So it's been residential for conceivably 100 years. Is that unreasonable, Kathy?
I think that's reasonable, and it would remain residential under this proposal.
But not single family home.
Correct.
Okay. And Peter, you and I say you or your partners or your affiliated entities purchased a 373 property in October of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And my understanding is that the purchase price was around, I won't say the purchase price, but it was around $437 per square foot. Does that sound about right?
I'd have to do the math, but I guess it could be. It sounds about right, I guess.
Okay. Well, I'll just ask it a different way. You purchased it for value. It was, you paid decent money for it. It wasn't abandoned, and it wasn't vacant, correct?
You're correct, yes.
Okay. And let me go back to Kathy and ask about this 7,225 square foot property. This rezoning is not, could not be handled by a minor lot line adjustment in an administrative manner. It has to go through this process because it is not a minor matter, correct?
An administrative property line shift simply moves a lot line. It does not change the zoning. So any request for a zone change would need to go through the Plan Commission and a public hearing process.
Okay. And just to go back to the size of this property we're talking about referring to it as like a 38-foot strip, but it's 7,225 square feet. Within the R1 zone, which is what the property is currently in, the minimum lot size is 9,375 square feet. So this 38-foot strip is 77% of a minimum lot in the R1. Is that right, Kathy? Does that sound about right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Peter, the 7,225 square feet is 20% of the current phase 3 property. And you're asking for a 20% increase in the phase 3 property. Is that right?
I'm assuming your math is correct, yes.
Okay, on or about. Okay, thank you. So to go to criteria D, the trend of development, if any, in the general area of the property in question, including changes, if any, which have taken place in its present zoning classification, which again is the R1. In the staff report, I note that the language includes changes, if any, which have taken place in its present zoning classification are not in there in the listed criteria. Kathy, I would guess what I'll ask, why is it not in there in the staff report?
I don't believe word for word the criteria were listed in the staff report. We did try and summarize those for brevity, so they are not necessarily word for word, but certainly the theme and the character and the intent was attempted to be captured.
Okay, so let's speak to that then. The changes, if any, which have taken place in its present zoning classification. This relates to trends of development. This is the R1 zone in the historic East Lake Forest Historic District. What rezonings have occurred in the East Lake Forest Historic District at all, really?
Certainly not many rezonings have occurred deep in the district. The entire district was rezoned in the 1980s to the R4 district, creating many nonconformities. But no, as you get deep into the district and into away from the edges, no rezonings have occurred. Certainly as you look to the north of this property, you do see the GR3 zoning district go further east. That area is not in the historic district, but there is a pattern of transition in this area, and the parcel proposed for rezoning is adjacent to property already zoned GR3. So it's not as though this is a change proposed deep into an established zoning district.
But it's within a historic district.
Correct, as is Market Square, which is not zoned residential, but is zoned commercial.
Right, okay. So are there any examples of a rezoning from a single family home to a multifamily residential unit within this historic district?
I can't quote any off the top of my head. I would have to do further research.
Okay, so this might be the first one, okay. Criteria 5 is it's a little lengthy. It's that there are chances of changing conditions in the applicable area of the amendment or the city generally that make the proposed amendment reasonably necessary to the promotion of the public health, safety, or general welfare. Just for the avoidance of any confusion, Merriam's dictionary defines necessary as absolutely needed or essential. So the issues are there chances of changing conditions in the applicable area or the city that make this amendment essential for the promotion of the public health, safety, and general welfare. Let's go through those one by one. The public health, Kathy, I'll let you speak first. Peter, you're welcome to respond as well, but what public health promotion is required here?
This site was long discussed by the Property and Public Lands Committee and the City Council. There was a building on the property that was considered hazardous. The west wall was bowing out. There were many problems and health and safety issues inside that building. As the City Council, actually as an ad hoc cultural corridor committee, and then the Property and Public Lands Committee studied this area, it was understood there would be some change, whether it would mean reconstructing that building, adding on to it. I know the then Historical Society had a number of plans, but certainly as you look at the the term trend of development. The city council, by adopting a master plan, by adopting development parameters, by studying this area, identified that this area was going to see some change from office to residential, from a type of a public use to multifamily residential. So through that, through those actions, there was a determination by the council that the health, safety, and welfare for the overall community would benefit by redevelopment of this area.
Okay, so just to put a point on that, when you talk about this area and you talk all that you just said, I won't disagree with you on that, but that it relates to the phase 3 property and the properties that are along McKinley. It does not deal, and the master plan does not speak to, at no point were the negotiations about this rezoning of the 7,225 square feet.
It didn't speak specifically to that property, but the development parameters that were laid out were pretty specific to achieving a reasonable transition. And I believe, as the developers have heard through numerous public hearings, that their effort to bring in a project that more properly transitioned resulted in them bringing forth the zone change. So no, the zone change was not contemplated, but it is certainly not contrary to the master plan and the development parameters that were adopted a while ago.
Okay, but the criteria is, it says it's reasonably necessary, reasonably essential. So Peter, I'll ask you this. Are there any other ways to develop this phase 3 property beyond incorporating in this 7,225 square foot parcel?
Well, let me step back. I think the drainage issues are only solvable by reworking this, and I think that you could develop a project in a lot of different ways. We feel that this is the best way, and that we are putting forward to that. And so I'm sure you could develop it in numerous different ways. Yes, I mean, it's not an obvious answer.
Okay.
I also think it's important to note that within the R1 district, we have many, many special uses. So the R1 district, or the R4 district, is not exclusively single family homes. And in fact, less than half a block away, we have the Church of the Holy Spirit, a special use permit. We have Gorton Community Center. So as we speak about rezonings, those are not rezonings per se, but they certainly are uses that are interspersed throughout our R4 district, including Lake Forest College, in a way that really creates a combination of single family residential as well as other types of uses. So from that perspective, this isn't unique or a first instance of any use in this area that does not fully conform to a single family residential use.
Right, but an eleemosynary use like a church is different than a multifamily dwelling unit. You would say that, you acknowledge that, right?
Sure, all of the uses are different, Lake Forest College and the cemetery, and yes, but I just wanted to make that point that historically Lake Forest residential zoning has been open to other types of use. In this case, we're not changing from residential, but we certainly are allowing multifamily as opposed to single family.
Okay, and then one last question. I have other points, but I'll wrap up with this for now. I'm really struggling with what the benefit is to the general welfare for this project. I understand the benefit to the developer, and I'm not casting aspersions. I understand a for-profit business. I understand the benefit to the condominium unit owners when they purchase the units. I understand the benefit to the city because it will get this property back on the tax rolls. What is the benefit to the general welfare? Can you speak specifically to that?
I can. The city's goal for many, many years has been specifically to increase the housing options near the central business district. What we are seeing is despite the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we are seeing significant interest from different types of businesses in our central business district. So by adding apartments to the north on Western Avenue, condominiums at different price points and new homes in that area, by adding these condos, we certainly are seeing that there's an interest in moving to Lake Forest and moving to close to the central business district, the train station, the library. So I believe that does speak to the general welfare of the community. To keep our downtown business district vital, it is in everyone's best interest. It certainly maintains property values throughout our community.
So I have two follow-up questions. I'm looking for the numbers here, but I believe in the last 12 months, there's been like 56 condo sales in Lake Forest, vast majority of which are within a 10 to 15 minute walk of the CBD. And at the moment, I believe there's like 16 condos on the market. There's obviously a very active, if you're a buyer of a condo, 56 people bought them this year. There's availability and there's 16. Why do we need to add more?
I believe these condos are in a unique location. I can't speak to the specific demand for these condos, but we certainly have seen the sales of these move very quickly. Different product types, different locations, different price points. I don't know if Mr. Whitmer has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, our demand for the units has been high, so that there really isn't anything available in town at this quality, at this location. And so we haven't had any issues in terms of finding buyers for this. Not only buyers from Lake Forest that are, you know, older buyers that are moving out of other homes, but also people moving into the community that, you know, are from other areas that can't find this kind of housing anywhere else.
Okay. My last question. So if there's this high demand and this promotes the general welfare, this is a hypothetical, but what would prevent Peter and his development team from buying the property across the street at 360 or 373 or 401 and instead of putting up, you know, this is good, it gets the properties on the tax roll and at a higher rate. If it provides a need to potential buyers, why not put a 50-unit condo building in? Where's the balance between providing a product for a consumer demand and protecting or recognizing the residential nature of this area?
The city's comprehensive plan and the zoning code specifically offer those protections. Keep in mind that this area, including the city property, has been the subject of discussions by special appointed ad hoc committees, by the Plan Commission, by the City Council, by the Property and Public Lands Committee for certainly over 10 years. So this is not happening overnight. This is not a surprise. The Plan Commission will be very involved as we move back into the update of the comprehensive plan. Setting out long-term strategies is very important. In this case, this particular area, bounded by Westminster and Deer Path, east of McKinley, was identified specifically in various plans for multifamily. That approval does not generally apply to everywhere else in the historic district. This development does not impact the integrity of the historic district as a whole. The existing ordinances and comprehensive plan are not weakened by this decision.
Okay, but during all those discussions and negotiations about all these, this transition corridor, for lack of a better term, the 7,225 square feet was not included in those discussions.
It was not, and the master plan was conceptual. The development parameters provided guidance and talked about a transition parcel. So you are correct that it was not specifically identified. But again, it needs to go through a public hearing process. It needs to go through, obviously you've had an extended process beginning in September 2019. So these things don't happen quickly. And ultimately the city council will make that decision. Whether or not this is approved wouldn't prevent someone else from coming in and making a request. The process is what provides those guarantees. Thoughtful deliberation, long-term planning. In my experience, neither the Plan Commission or City Council have made knee-jerk reactions.
Okay. We still, the City Council requests us to go through the LaSalle Sinclair standards and the, as well as the special use provisions in the code, but I'll hold off on those. I'll end my questions for now. Thank you.
Chairman Kerr, may I make a point of order?
Yes.
The document you just referred to, Commissioner, includes the entire code. So I just want to make sure it's clear for the record. I mean, you referenced a Supreme Court case as well, but I don't like leaving. Kathy certainly doesn't need my defense. She's handles herself excellently, but I think it's inappropriate to leave open the idea that the Plan Commission is not aware of, nor were we provided with the entire code as it relates to both the zoning and the special use. So I just didn't want to leave that open.
And also, Commissioner Moorhead, this is the time for any questions. The latter part of the program is for comments and discussion among members. So if you have other questions, now is the appropriate time to ask them.
Sure. I didn't want to hog all the time here, but fine. So to go through the LaSalle Sinclair standards that the City Council requested us to review. The first.
Sorry, may I make another point of order? I apologize for interrupting.
Yes, please.
That is not the standard that we are using. The standard that prevails here is the code, the zoning code, and that's again detailed in the letter that you just referenced at the end of your question.
So just to confirm, I'm fine avoiding this, going through these 8 points if I don't have to, but I do believe it was Alderman, might have been Alderman Rummel that said she wanted us to go through these point by point.
I can add that we have confirmed with the city attorney that the Plan Commission should be focusing on the zone change criteria in the code that certainly were based upon those factors. But the standards in the code are the appropriate evaluation criteria for the Plan Commission. And that's at the direction of the city attorney.
Okay, that's fine. I agree. So that's fine. Well, so we'll not go through the LaSalle Sinclair standards for now. So I'll hold off on that. And then the special use, we can go through this now.
Do you have questions for the petitioner or staff regarding those issues, or are these more discussions among the commissioners later?
Give me 1 second. There's points. I think we can go through these later. That would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Atkinson?
Yes, thank you. You know, I did watch the city council meeting too. And so I did take a screenshot of the zone change criteria summary that Kathy presented at that. And I just want to make sure I understand, because we were requested to go through those LaSalle Sinclair factors. Are you expecting us to go through each one of these factors that you had posted at the city council meeting, like compatibility with surrounding uses and zoning, impact on property values, etc.
The zone change criteria from the code are included in the staff report. I acknowledge they're in a paraphrased way, but the criteria in the staff report are from the code, and those are the criteria that the Plan Commission is charged with using to evaluate any request for zone change.
Okay, and those are, they're in a different order in the staff report than your presentation to City Council, but I just want to make sure because I prepared remarks based on that zone change criteria, and I just want to make sure that that's what City Council is expecting us to do.
Yes, the zone change criteria are outlined on pages 4 and 5 of the staff report.
Okay, I appreciate your questioning, Commissioner Moorhead. I think you were doing what City Council was asking us to do. So Peter, I have a couple questions, and I think we've brought this up before a couple times. On your Black engineering drawings, I don't see 351 Westminster on the drawing. And that was supposed to be corrected. Is there a reason why that wasn't corrected?
No, I think that because they're engineering drawings, they aren't really showing the context of the surrounding area. So all our drawings really include those, and the engineerings typically don't show all the structures that wouldn't be affected by the engineering.
Okay, because a large portion of the discussion tonight is claiming that your condo building will be the transition to the single family homes, but yet 351 is a single family home. And that is really the transition between 333 and the single family homes to the east. So I'm just curious, why don't you consider 351 the transition?
I absolutely think it is a transition. And I think all the material that I had shown on the elevations, all my site plans, all indicate our models, everything indicate the 351 is on there. It's just that Flex Engineering didn't show as an outline. So all the information that was given to the Plan Commission all include the outlines of all the houses in the area. So I think we absolutely agree with you in terms of that the 351 is an integral part of the whole context of what we're dealing with. And I addressed that, I thought, pretty clearly in the presentation that I did earlier.
Well, you had said that the condo building was a transition to the single family homes, but actually, if you're transitioning from condo buildings on the corner down to single family home, that would lead you to believe that you would go to another single family home to transition further, instead of now you're kind of going up in scale and mass from a single family
Actually,
to a condo.
if you were to, so I think we do relate to the scale of the 351 building in terms of height and approximate width. But it is connected to the condo building, and actually it is a part of the condominium of the 333 building. So I guess when I call it condo building of the 333, I'm including that in the 351 is part of that.
Well, that's not actually correct, because that's a single family home. And if you remember about that development, 333, that was very controversial. And this goes back many years ago. It was a very controversial development because there were single family homes that they demoed on that corner. And it was an accommodation to the developer to attach that 351 to the condo building so they didn't demolish it. So it's kind of a funky situation now, unfortunately, but 351, there's a family that lives there, and it's a single family home. So I'm just curious why that isn't considered the transition, and you're considering your condo building the transition. Well, let me ask you this. So on your condo building, you say it's 2 stories, but there is living space on the 3rd floor, correct? It's outdoor living space.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so there will be people on the 3rd floor.
You will use the roof as an outdoor space, yes.
Right, okay. And then also in terms of scale, what is the square footage of that condo building?
It's a little over 11,000 square feet.
Okay, so that's not really compatible to the single family homes along that street. Okay, and let me see. Let me see. So it gets me back to the whole idea of the master plan once again, because when this master plan was developed, looking at the streetscape of Westminster, it had proposed a single family home or a duplex in this location. So the city council is asking us to find the best possible solution to this site. Have you considered a single family home or duplex to be more compatible with the two single family homes on either side?
I think what we have considered is we've considered the massing of the houses on either side and on the whole street. And so that is what we designed to. We think it is more in keeping with the overall development. In our proposal, we think it makes more sense to have it as a condominium.
But we're supposed to be exploring all alternatives here for the best possible solution. So if there's an alternative that you haven't explored, it leaves an opportunity here for you to explore.
I had explored numerous different proposals. Early on, we proposed 3 years ago to have a larger footprint and to have a duplex on the front of the property. And at that time, it was considered that it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. A duplex is basically just a multifamily split the other direction. So, you know, we have basically fronting the Westminster, we have a duplex, it's just horizontal instead of vertical. So that's really the difference. The other thing that when we looked at the duplex solution, really the space between the duplex and the condominium behind it was insignificant. It basically looked like one big structure. So it made a lot more sense to make it one structure, not to have two separate structures. And that's how we move forward with that early on in the process.
But just to confirm, a duplex would be 2 units, not 8.
There would be multiple duplexes on the property if we were to do that.
Okay. Well, I just still think there's some type of alternatives to investigate here, considering, you know, single family home and duplex was specified on the master plan and would be more in keeping with the historic character of this neighborhood. I think that, and then 351, I still don't understand why you haven't considered that the transition to single family homes and you're considering a condo of 11,000 square feet as a transition. Okay, so I think that's all for my questioning right now. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional questions from other members of the commission?
I have just one for Kathy. When related to that 351 property, does that meet any, and I mean any, of the zoning requirements, setbacks, that would be considered in kind of a traditional R1, if that's the suggestion?
It doesn't. As Commissioner Atkinson said, it was part of an overall approval of that condominium building. So it is not a standalone single family home. It is attached to the larger building. It reads as a single mass, and it was a requirement of the approval in an effort to preserve that historic house, knowing that 2 or 3 others were being demolished.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, were you able to do your density math?
Sorry, I haven't yet, but
okay.
Maybe I can do it during public testimony.
Yeah.
I have one question as a follow-up to Commissioner Douglas's question on a 30-foot setback versus 38-foot setback. And there is the issue of the drainage, which I do consider important for the two residential properties, 373 and the one to the south, which is 385, as well as the Phase 3 site. If you reduce from 38 feet to 30, will you still have adequate room for the drainage pipe? Is that going to straddle the two properties? Will it be only on your condominium property? Because I want to make sure that if we are to consider reduction in that, we want to make sure that there's no harm being done to either the landscaping or the drainage.
So I think we were comfortable with the drainage in the old plan before we made the change. So I think we have enough space to create, and I think we do have to plan out the landscape in the drain pipe and how that all works. And we have that laid out. The additional, and we would just basically scoot the drain pipe over west the 8 feet. And so we would have the same engineering plan that we have currently. It would just be moved over 8 feet. So I don't think it would create any hardships in terms of the placement of the storm line through there if we were to move the property line over.
And is Mr. Mariani there? Sorry, I mean, what about the landscaping and tree roots? Is that going to be impacted if this is narrow?
We would work around that so that it would be deeper than what the tree roots would have for the pieces there. Unfortunately, Mr. Mariani wasn't able to stay, so he's not here.
Okay.
We had situations in Regents Row when we put all the trees in there, and we worked the drainage around those existing things, and they've actually thrived quite well. And so it's a tighter kind of situation. So the amount of space that we have here, I think will be fine.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions from other commissioners or for staff? All right, then at this point, commissioners will have opportunity for comments later on. Now we will proceed to the public testimony period, not to exceed 5 minutes per speaker. At this time, I'd like to invite comments from the public. The dial-in number is 847-810-3643. If your comments have already been stated by another speaker, you can simply state your agreement with the previous comments. There's no need to repeat the comments, and all are welcome to speak. And prior to speaking, I will administer the oath to each resident, and we ask that you provide your name and your address prior to speaking.
Chairman Kerr, at the moment, we have 2 callers. I'm going to bring the first one on in just a moment.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, my name's Regina Lind, and I live at 338 East Westminster. And I had some comments ready to say, but then I didn't realize that we were going to be looking at a new site plan tonight. So that sort of changes everything. I think that information would have been helpful for the community to have. So we would have, maybe crafted our comments around that. Having said that, I have a few comments for Peter.
Ms. Lynn, before you continue, I do need to swear you in. This is a public testimony portion.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge? Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
I do.
please. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
I know, I'm having trouble hearing you too. I'm swearing that everything I am about to say is the truth.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. My name is Regina Lind from 338 East Westminster. And having not been aware that we were going to be talking about a new site plan tonight, I've prepared different statements or different information, but I'm going to try to compensate for that. First of all, I wanted to say to Peter that, Mr. Whitmer, that I hope you do remember that early on there was a single family home suggested, I think it was from the master plan, that there should be a single family home on that property. I just wanted to repeat that. And also you made the point of saying that you've picked up garbage, construction debris in the neighborhood. And I think that that's great. We really appreciate that. But I do want to say that this has been for the neighborhood. It has impacted our neighborhood greatly. It's been detrimental and dangerous. And I'm looking at the special use. It must not be detrimental or dangerous to the neighborhood. And it has been this construction because we've had our streets have been impacted with dirt that despite my many calls to the city and to Altunian, dirt has been dragged onto the street and then left to dry so that it becomes dust. Those calls to the city have been ignored to the point where I finally had to go out and stand in their driveway and block a cement truck from leaving to get the attention of Altunian and Company to get somebody to come and clean that street up. The city didn't clean up the street, nor did the developer. Now, my point here is that the neighbors do not have a lot of trust in these developers anymore. Even the picture that you showed, that was shown of this, what's going to look like, didn't show from the perspective of the people across the street. We're going to have to look at this mass. Now they showed mature trees on those drawings, of course, which were not going to look like that for 10 years or more. No, I think again, they illustrate a general disregard and disrespect for the neighbors. In addition, I think that we've been unable over these past couple of years to make improvements effectively to our house because we have so much dirt and dust that we can't paint, we can't do certain things that need to be done to our house. That's number 3 on there. Well, I'm not going to go on with that anymore, but I think that we have, I don't think this process would have been dragged on as long if we'd had more cooperation between the city. Kathy's always been very helpful, but the city in general and these developers, they're not good neighbors. And I think that presents a problem. There's no trust between the developer and the neighbors anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linden. We have also received an email from you, I believe, that arrived today, and that's been distributed to the commission members.
Thank you.
Michelle, our next speaker.
Just a moment, please. I'll bring them on.
Hi,
This
is
Go ahead.
Jeff Terosian. I'm sorry. This is Jeff Terosian. I live at 401 East Westminster.
Mr. Tarosian, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give or have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do. And thank you, Madam Chairwoman and commissioners, for obviously your volunteerism and your hard work and your multiple hearings and reviews of these issues. It probably comes as no surprise that my wife and I object to the petition, and we're joined by what I believe now is 1,300 others who've signed an objection to this petition. That's about a fifth or maybe even a quarter of all households in Lake Forest. So that is probably the most significant objection ever to be heard at a plan commission hearing, although we're not all in the same room, obviously, right now. We are not against progress, and I want to make that clear. We never objected to buildings 1 and 2. Those are not in the historic district or in the overlay district, and we didn't object to them. We didn't object to the 2016 master plan, which shows no condos on Westminster at all. And just as a point of reference, the city council has never approved condos on Westminster. We didn't object to redevelopment of the Swift property just to the east of us, which is nearly 4 acres and has now been divided into 4 single-family acre houses. We didn't object to that, and actually we came to the meeting to support it, came to multiple meetings to support it, and support the beautiful designs that are being implemented on those properties. And we didn't object to several years ago when the Donovans sought the right to tear down their current house and build a new single-family house on that property. We didn't object to that. So the community and the neighbors here aren't naysayers screaming at the TV about how things change too fast. Everyone in this neighborhood is committed to progress. They put significant money into updating their historic houses and making them even better. That's progress. And up and down the street, the contributing structures that support the historic nature of this historic district have never looked better. No, we're in favor of progress, but every community wants progress. What separates Lake Forest from the rest is that we want smart progress. And when you live in the historic and overlay districts, your progress must be further tempered. You must have 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future at all times. If that doesn't appeal to a developer, that's not a failing of the community. It's a misunderstanding of the last 50 years of this historic and overlay district. Never before, Commissioner Moorhead, you asked this question, never before has an East Lake Forest historic district property been rezoned from single family to condos. There is simply no precedent for such an action. Not in the middle of the historic district, not on the east part of the historic district, not on the edges of the historic district. Now cannot be the time to do that, especially when people are moving from the city to Lake Forest in droves to buy single family houses in Lake Forest. Now, I've used in the past when I've objected the phrase project creep, and that's very true on what's happening here. But I'm a little concerned that this was the intention all along. The developer and the architect sat in my dining room 2 years ago and tried to sell us on a plan for them to buy the Donovan property in total and have this project cover the entire Donovan property in addition to phase 3 with condos. And we said at that time, we had another neighbor with us at the time, we said at that time that we do not support that and we will never support that. That neighbor who was with us has since moved. And the principal reason they moved out of this community was because of this development. The person who bought their house has since said they would not have bought that house if they knew that this development and this rezoning would go through. The Donovans negotiated to sell 373 to the developer for years. This wasn't a recent situation. They've been negotiating the sale of that property for years and was finally silenced by being bought out for much more than the half acre that they sold was actually worth. Now the city, when we heard this was the plan 2 years ago from the developer, way before it's come to this commission's attention, we approached the city and said, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? The developer says they're trying to buy 373 and they're going to put condos all over it. What say you, city? And the city said that the city would never support a rezoning of the Donovan property from single family to multifamily. Now everyone's entitled to change their mind, But that's what the city said. And the city also has confirmed at the last last city council meeting that it was the city who approached the developer and suggested to the developer that the developer buy the Donovan property so that it can take a sliver to make this project work. Now, look, I understand the city is wearing two hats, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the city trying to do what's best for the city's parcel that the city wants to sell. But it leaves the community with no voice and no advocate when I'm limited to 5 minutes, when I could probably spend an hour dealing with the inaccuracies in some of the staff report. And the city gets to advocate for their position, but there's no one left to advocate for the community. Luckily, the community still has each of you. And we hope that you will heed the concerns of the 1,300 on our side and dig a bit deeper into the advocacy presented to you in support of this petition by the city and the petitioner himself. Now, the petition, I'll say, doesn't address the concerns about the historic district that I've been talking about for months in this situation. It doesn't address the concerns at all about the overlay district. It's not been mentioned at all. People think the overlay district doesn't mean anything, and my response is principally, it must mean something. It must mean something. And the petition doesn't at all comply with the LaSalle Sinclair factors. And I bristle at the idea that City Council made a statement that they want this plan commission to go through the LaSalle Sinclair factors and make a recommendation on each of them. And that the city attorney has unilaterally, without a public hearing and without being here today to present, unilaterally said that's wrong and the city council shouldn't be allowed to get what it asked for. That's pretty outrageous. If the city attorney is making a statement that what the city council did was wrong and that it's not appropriate and it's not the right standard, first of all, that flies in the face of what the city attorney told the city council live at the city council hearing, but it's also inappropriate to be communicated through an intermediary who's an advocate for the city's position to this commission in order to quell the comments and the questions and the duties that this committee is trying to perform. So I view that as inappropriate. The LaSalle Sinclair factors cover some of the same ground as the ordinance that Commissioner Moorhead was going through. I thought those questions were excellent and pinpointed and exactly what the city council wanted you to do. I would say that any vote, this petition is basically the same petition that happened before. And a petitioner is not allowed to just keep pursuing the same petition over and over and over again, hoping one commissioner misses a meeting and then doesn't vote. You don't get to do that. And the reason you don't get to do that is because if it's ever challenged in court, then the court is going to say, I have two separate decisions on the same petition. One of them, ipso facto, must be arbitrary and capricious. Because if there's nothing has changed, a commissioner cannot change their vote. And so the city council did not request you to change your votes. The city council requested that this commission go through the LaSalle Sinclair factors, as Commissioner Moorhead was so aptly questioning about, and to consider the best and possible and highest best use of an entire phase 3 project.
Mr. Terosian, sorry, but the 5-minute buzzer did go off quite some time ago. Can you
and we appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, do we have any other speakers?
Chairman Kerr, we do. I'm going to allow some of the speakers in the audience to talk and get some of the callers back on the line and in the queue.
Okay.
Miss Downey, I've given you permission to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you need to swear me in?
Please state your name and address, and then I will swear you in.
Sally Downey, 475 East Westminster.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give and have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Please proceed.
I'd like to start by saying I've called 5 times and haven't been able to get through, so be patient with people. They're trying. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk once again. I've sent you another email, so I will not go over the reasons why this project should absolutely be a no for a zoning change and a special use permit. I'd like to bring up 5 additional points after reading the staff's updated report and seeing the petitioner's updated schematics. Number 1, in the city staff report, they claim that in an effort to address comments heard earlier in the process, the petitioners acquired the adjacent property in East Lake Forest, property on the east, 373 Westminster. Fact, the developer was well aware of 373 Westminster being an option well before the neighbors' comments or before comments were made by different commissions. I was told by the developer when I toured building 1 that the city had suggested he'd look at the neighboring property to expand. He said Mr. Donovan wanted an unreasonable amount of money and that the neighbors he spoke to didn't want it. So this wasn't a recent solution to appease our concerns about mass, but a way to back into a solution thought out much earlier in the process. Also regarding, 2, process. The neighbors keep being told we have plenty of access to be part of the conversation, but a conversation is a 2-way street. I offered to get the neighborhood together and shared all of our emails with the city and developers. One meeting was set up midweek, late in the afternoon when only 2 people could go. It wasn't a conversation, but a chance to look at the model. The Plan Commission asked them to communicate better with us, but we never heard from them again. There were conversations happening and the city was very much in the room where it happened. Our Ward 1 meeting last fall, when asked what the status of Building 3 was, city staff told us we would hear something soon. Soon after, we saw moving trucks at the Donovans. We figured it out pretty quickly. So the city knew about the developers buying the property, but the neighbors didn't until it came to you last fall. As a neighbor, I cannot honestly say the city is acting as a neutral party in this development. In fact, the city is acting more like the commercial developer. The city has been instrumental in having the developer acquire the church house, giving the library some extra land, and now signing off on what they see as just a sliver of land being used for a 2-story condo that the neighbors somehow requested. Who is our advocate for this development in our neighborhood? Number 3, in the city report, it states that we, I'm gathering we as the neighbors, have not shown proof that this will lower our property values. Then in the next sentence, the city implies that it actually will most likely improve it. So my response is, try getting a realtor to speak out tonight against a deal that is seen as against both Mr. Altunian and the city. Since you insist we come up with proof, I'm thinking the developer in the city should give proof as to where it enhances our historic neighborhood and, more importantly, our property values. And they cannot use current high prices, which are due to COVID and city exodus. Number 4, the schematics. I do not recognize my neighborhood anymore. Sherwood forest trees, the Lardino's huge arborvitae hedge, the Westminster tree-lined and houseless streetscape, along with a tiny 2-story condo playing peekaboo behind the mature trees, paints an unrealistic picture of the reality of this condo. Let's call it what it is. It is not the McKinley project. It is not the McKinley development. This is the Westminster development, which fronts our historic residential neighborhood. And don't get me started about the library, which is drawn from the perspective of the library's Roomba lawnmower. It makes the library look like the Capitol building, and the house and the petite-looking condo in the distance are at a laughable and strangely foggy perspective. Lastly, the city repeats throughout that the master plan is ever-changing. But who here would have ever thought it would have expanded south by taking down the church house, or now hoping to expand east, which requires removing a house in a historic residential district? This house may be from the 60s, but its scale and their lawn gave our neighborhood more green space. Between the Donovans and the large green lawn in front of the Historical Society building, our street had a nice break from bricks and mortar. When the city says ever-changing, I asked, should all future projects be looked at in terms of they could grow bigger and beyond the brown boundary lines? I'm clearly frustrated and tired by this process like all of you, but I want to make sure you hear I am not anti-development. Build condo 3, but build it without a zoning and special use change. It can be 2 stories in the remaining parcels, which the developer has said is more popular type of condo to sell. We do not owe the developer, however, his desire to maximize his investment. And since property values are increasing, perhaps he can do fewer units at a higher price point. I ask you to please vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will call on the next public participant online to speak. Just a moment. Ms. Lopat, you've been brought into the meeting so you can speak.
Thank you. I guess
Hi,
I'm-
would you please identify yourself and give your address, and then I will swear you in?
I am the apparently infamous Rami Lopat. I live at 410 East Woodland Road.
Thank you. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give and have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. I sent you an email today and I hope you'll find
And
it.
that has been distributed. Thank you.
It's great. I hope you'll take a look at it. First of all, I do want to register my objection to the zoning change and lot consolidation. Several of you tonight, and thank you for all your work, have tried to get at the question that I was asking, but I have not heard direct and detailed responses to how we derive the number of units that are available to build on lots 1, the south lot, or lot 2 at the north, based on the planned development standards in the city code. Mr. Whitmer, in his narrative statement on page 6, said that he has 0.9 acres of land to develop, and that is 39,204 square feet. By the city code, if you divide it by 6,250, he could build about 6.5 units. Well, I testified to the city council that there was 0.9 acres, that's Mr. Whitmer's number, available to build on. And if that's an acre, that would be about a 5,000 square foot house by my calculation. But after I testified to the city council, I realized in looking at the lots that they appeared a lot smaller than an acre. How did it get to an acre? Well, he included the alley. I haven't heard the Plan Commission discuss the alley and how that fits in to these calculations of how many units are available to him. And that goes to the city council's posit to you to come up with the best possible use for these parcels. By my calculation, there's a 1/2 acre if you take out the alley. Why do you take out the alley? Because in the planned development of the city code, it says that the net development area shall be determined by subtracting from the gross the area set aside for non-residential uses and the area devoted to public or private streets or roads. Mr. Whitmer didn't mention this on page 6 of his narrative statement. I'd like to know why the plan development, why that sentence in the plan development of the code is not being used in these calculations. I did hear that the development parameters or recommendations for the plan development, I think I heard that that would allow 30 units, getting to Mr. Douglas's question about density, but I've never been able to find that those recommendations were ever approved by the city council. Certainly they didn't in 2016 before they approved the master plan in 2017. So how many units is possible? And if this condo was moved back onto the south lot, where it belongs in the master plan, that south lot is 11,640 square feet. divide that by 6,250 square feet, and you'd be getting 1.8 units on that lot. It's a 1/4 acre. It's a postage stamp. So to put a condo development of this size, 26,000 square feet on a 1/2 acre and then add in the alley is just too much on the streetscape. We have to be able to come up with a better plan for this parcel. It is the transition. It is in the historic district. It means everything to the entry to Westminster. And I really, really hope that you'll be able to get down into the weeds, do the math, and decide that this does not meet your standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one more raised hand to call on.
Okay.
Callers on hold. So just a moment, please.
It's about 8:45. The question would be, at some point, we'll need to take a break. I'd certainly like to complete public testimony. And if time permits, petitioner rebuttal and staff response.
Ms. Watts is available to speak on the meeting now, Chairman.
Good evening, Ms. Watts.
Yes,
Would
hi.
you please, hi, would you please state your name and your address?
I live at 1230 North Western Avenue, Unit 212, Lake Forest.
And your first name?
Emily, the last
Emily.
name Watts.
Thank you. Ms. Watts, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Please proceed.
I have sent an email also to Kathy Cerniak and to all the members, but I would like to address the parallels between this proposed development and what has happened in the past with Kelmscott, which is at Laurel and Western, that was built by Focus Development, in these ways, in terms of the master plan, city property, petition from neighbors, and drainage problem. The facilities property at on Northwestern in a comprehensive plan was not adhered to. Initially, it was supposed to be green space, park-like area, developed into multi-use retail, and then apartments above, right at the corner of Laurel and Western. Well, that went out the window. We didn't adhere to the comprehensive plan, and it sounds like we're not adhering to the comprehensive plan here. The second thing is that that area, the facilities, was city property, and it was turned over to a development company. Same thing happening here. There was a petition by the neighbors. Over 300 people submitted a petition against this development to no avail, which I think is happening now in this McKinley Westminster condo project. Drainage problems. The garages and basements around Crystal Point on Northwestern and homes on Burr Oak have a long time had problems with flooding, and the city has had to respond. The Focus Development built the property of those condos and single family homes and apartments with a higher 4-foot slope to the west, which meant the water would go towards the east. And this has exasperated the issue of drainage. So I see that there's also a problem with drainage. Now, they knew, the development company knew before building that drainage was an issue for not only Crystal Point, but the homes on Burr Oak. They knew it in advance, but it still happens long after the development of that property. And the last thing I want to say is not a parallel with what you're doing tonight or what you're learning about and what we're learning about, but what about affordable housing? Affordable housing was supposed to be part of Focused Development's plan, but they paid $5,000 for each affordable housing to HUD so they could get out of offering affordable housing. And in my letter to you, I said, we're not meeting the needs of essential people who are deemed heroes who want to live in Lake Forest. What about those middle income people? What's going to happen? Are we just going to be a community of people who can afford $1 million homes? And you say, well, why did you move here? I moved here because my family is here. My grandchildren are here. And I could barely afford to even come to this community. I came at a time when the condos at Crystal Point were on the down, going down in terms of what we could afford. So I think you need to really rethink this. I think you need to deny this zoning change and the special use permit. I do thank you for your work because I know you're volunteers. I know you put long hours into the work that you do for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watts.
Chairman, we will go back to a couple of callers on the line now. Just a moment. Chairman, you have a caller on the line now.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Todd Curry, and I live at 360 East Westminster. I want to thank the plan.
And Mr. Curry, I do need to swear you in.
Need to be sworn in, Chairman Kerr?
Sorry, I do need to swear you in.
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give and have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
We've heard certain commissioners tonight asking for alternatives, and the developer, I do not believe, is under a particular obligation to do so. I could be wrong. Mr. Whitmer has submitted a plan and has a history of doing great work. He has every right to seek a return on his investment, and presumably, in doing so, the plans that he has offered will offer him and his partners a positive ROI. The economics of this development need to fit certain guidelines for this plan to be undertaken for all parties involved, including the city. And presumably, as those are evaluated, if the economics of this development don't fit within certain city guidelines, it may not be accepted. So there's some problems with understanding that as a matter of the public, though, as a member of the public. The city's on both sides of this deal. It's not neutral. And Kathy has testified that there's historically little or no interest in this lot. We heard Commissioner Moorhead discuss condominium demand in Lake Forest, and Mr. Whitmer reiterate that with many examples. So Kathy's statement of low historical interest may be indeed a matter of history, but we can't say today there would not be interest in the lot and in developing on the lot. However, we don't know the terms of the property deal the city has entered into with this developer. It's at least 4 years later, and the terms are not public. I object to that. I object to it strenuously, as we can't evaluate the entwinement of the city, what incentives they have, what motives they may have. We can't discern those unless we fully understand the terms to which they've agreed. Furthermore, it's impossible to seek alternatives if no one else has any understanding of the terms that were proposed to and accepted by the city. So I would ask the Commission to consider 4 things. If you know the terms, why are you able to share them? Why are they not public? Second, given the contention with this property, might we be better served by inviting a set of developers to submit their plans with terms. Third, there seems to be a lot of questions of accuracy in the materials that are presented at these meetings. I can't say that I attend all the city meetings, but those that I've attended have largely been Plan Commission and City Council. And any and all of the materials that are summarized regarding this development and the materials distributed and the questions, whether questions are at bar, if it were, seem to be riddled with question marks. Let me say that. I can't say how pervasive that is, and I'm not here to suggest scienter, but I am suggesting that if there are inaccuracies in the process, the sources of those errors should be sought and corrected. You cannot be expected to make good decisions about good data. We certainly in the public don't do that either. Lastly, I'll keep asking this regardless of its appropriateness, and certain commissioners may object, but the city has effectively sanctioned 6 and 7 day week of construction, 6 and 7 days per week construction, at this site for 3.5 years. I don't know how the city can effectively, through private development, pursue this when they themselves in public development only do development 5 days a week. This is disruptive to the community. It is not, frankly, to our health and well-being. And projects, certainly of construction of all kinds, should be granted some 7-day access as they finish the building up, say 30 to 60 days. Anyone who's ever done construction knows that makes sense. We're at 1,300 days. So I will continue to ask the city put in place guidelines to restrict development in a residential neighborhood to 5-day construction for the bulk of the term. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman, just a moment, please. Chairman, you have the next caller on the line.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, with whom am I speaking?
Leslie Lardino.
Leslie Lardino, yes. And you are at 351 East Westminster?
Correct.
And Ms. Lardino, Mrs. Lardino, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give and has previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Please proceed.
Okay, so thank you all. So firstly, to confirm, we purchased the home 351 as a single family home. And I'm currently looking at our property title and it states single family home. So let's make sure we're all speaking accurately here in this meeting, especially from the council. So I'd appreciate that, please. Secondly, regarding the rezoning, I agree with the one of the commissioner's comments that our house 351 is the transition to single family homes. So having condos to the west of our house will break up that transition. So I do agree with I forget what commissioner mentioned that, but I do agree with those comments. So that's all I have to add. Thank you all for contributing for this meeting.
Thank you. Michelle, do we have other speakers?
We do have 2 other callers at the moment and 1 raised hand. So I'll take another caller for you. Just a moment. Chairman, you have the next caller on the line.
Thank you. Hi, with whom am I speaking?
This is Patrick Corsilia,
Patrick, could you spell your last name, please?
Corsiglia, and I reside at 723 North McKinley, one of the two existing buildings that have been developed by the developer.
And Mr. Concilia, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
As I said, I reside 723 North McKinley, and I'm the president of the condominium association. Between the two buildings, there are 18 units. Two of them are affordable, providing that type of housing to the community, and I think it's important to note that. Most all of the residents here are Lake Forest lifetime residents. Speaking for myself, I had my office at the 725 North McKinley building for many years, and it was, I guess I'd just say, not a credit to the community, and I raised my family in a single family house about half a mile from here, where we've been residents for 35 years in Lake Forest. Most of the residents here continue to be active members of the community. Many of us served various organizations, and we continue to want to be here because of relationships with friends, family, or children. And I'm just grateful that developers created this opportunity for me to and my family to continue. And we're in the post-college years, our kids' post-college years, our relationship with the city. And in particular, with respect to the general welfare, I do believe that the city has an interest in creating and maintaining housing close to downtown for older members of the community. And it's a great thing to not have to drive your car. I get up in the morning, I can walk over to Gerhardt's and have a cup of coffee and a croissant. Our dog is on a first name basis with the pet people. You know, I can go on a Friday and after work and have a margarita Authentico, and that adds to the richness of our community. So I do think it's in the city, and we all know that retail is undergoing some changes and needs support to maintain the vitality that's important to all the people who live here in Lake Forest. So I think it's important that the commissioners understand that all of these buildings fill a need for the residents of Lake Forest that inhabit them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Michelle?
We have one more caller, and I'll bring her in just a moment.
Thank you.
The caller is on the line now.
Hi, with whom am I speaking?
Hi, my name is Anna Block, and I live at 441 East Westminster with my fiance and our daughter.
Ms. Block, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give and have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
So I just wanted to kind of reiterate, growing up here in Lake Forest, in the beautiful Market Square community and the surrounding area, both my fiance and I are so happy and blessed to be back here in the community. When we had purchased the home in December, we were aware of the new condominiums being brought into the McKinley project, but we were not aware that it was going to be pushing onto the street view of Westminster on our home street here. So we just wanted to say again, by allowing this zoning change in our historic district, we're changing the historical preservation that our community really holds true to
on these east side neighborhoods. We believe there should be no changes to current zoning ordinances nor special use of permits granted to the current zoning in this East Lake Forest Historic District. Specifically, we are opposed to attempt to change single-family residential zoning to permit the construction of phase 3 of the McKinley Road development. We want to retain the charm and historic integrity of our community and the boundaries that the city put in place years ago to ensure the privacy that so many come to Lake Forest to enjoy. There's nothing like beautiful Market Square and the historical surrounding homes, and we would ask the City Council to vote no to a zoning change in our historic residential district, and we would ask that the Council uphold the Plan Commission's no vote to a zoning change. Condo 3 does not transition into our residential street and will negatively impact the value of our properties. After having briefly spoken with our real estate agent who had sold us the home last December, before we were aware of the zoning change being brought to the table, we had discussed, the idea of the home being close to town, the idea of the home also being close to the lake, having the best of both worlds. And we feel that, not just for our home, but for surrounding homes in the area, that this could negatively impact the residential properties in the area. So again, we want to thank everybody for their time, but we would like to absolutely vote no to the zoning change, and we would like the City Council to also vote no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, do we have any other speakers, or are we done?
We do not have any other callers, and I do not see any other raised hands.
All right, well, given the lateness of the hour, I would poll to see if we could do a short break prior to rebuttals, or do you want to push through? Who would like a break? Okay, we will take a 5-minute break and then return for both petitioner rebuttal and staff response to public testimony. The meeting is adjourned for 5 minutes.
Happy to, if I might have missed something. If I did, let me know and I'll try to address it. But I think that's all my notes have for the comments.
All right, thank you. Ms. Cerniak?
Thank you, Chairman Kerr. I do have a number of points that were raised in the public testimony that I'd like to respond to. Again, I'll speak to the construction activity. There is no question this construction project has been ongoing and has been disruptive. Early on, the city received a number of complaints, and in response, requirements beyond what was usual, what's normally required on a construction site, were put in place by the city engineer. Different type of fencing, some drainage swales were installed, some landscaping was installed. When we have gotten complaints, and I do have to say I haven't received any in quite a while. Now maybe people are just not calling, but when we received complaints, we had engineering staff out there, we had our code enforcement officer out there. So I would encourage anyone at any point, if there, obviously there's disruption, but if there's mud on the road, if the road is blocked, please call us. We are here to respond. the question of a duplex keeps coming up. I do want to remind the commission that in September 2019, you saw a plan that had a duplex fronting on Westminster and a condominium behind that. At the direction of the commission, there was some thought that those two structures together just created a very large mass. At the direction of the commission, the developer did bring forward an alternate plan, a plan that removed that duplex. And that was the point in time where the discussion moved away from the duplex. So that was one of the many options that have been explored. The question has come up about whether there have been rezonings in the R4 district. And I did mention special uses that occur throughout the district. I also know we have raised before that many years ago, and I don't know the details off the top of my head, there are condominiums on Mayflower Road. It was an adaptive reuse of a building that actually had some reconstruction. There were separate garages built. There certainly is surface parking. So there is an example of condominiums in the historic district that have been there for decades and have not resulted in dominoes falling along Mayflower Road and creating condominiums. In discussions about how to adaptively reuse some of the large buildings, there have been other discussions of condominiums in the historic district. Those have not moved forward. With respect to the developer's purchase of the 373 Westminster property, the city did not influence the sale. We did not influence the seller. We did not influence the buyer. We did, on a continuing basis, having heard the concerns of neighbors, the concerns of the Plan Commission, encourage the petitioner to explore all options. And that really relates to the question about why the petitioner keeps pursuing the project. I believe, unlike other developers who may have taken a different course of action, the developer has been responsive, whether that's been good or bad. But throughout this multi-meeting process, the city has not made a decision. So this petition still is an active petition, and the petitioner has a right to keep bringing back options if they so choose until the city makes a decision. With respect to the Sinclair and LaSalle factors, those are factors considered by courts. The Plan Commission is required to consider the criteria in the code. It is important that the city adhere to the process that is established in our code. The code pulls, the criteria are based very much along the lines of the Sinclair LaSalle factors, but the code criteria are the specific criteria that the city is required to use. The density. Again, this is a planned development. The density is determined on a project-wide basis. So the density permitted on all of the lots included in the development is calculated. And again, the earlier documents, the development parameters, the purchase sale agreement, all of those speak to allowing, and I don't remember if it was 30 units or 32 units permitted overall, but those documents speak to allowing up to 14 units on the phase 3 property. So it's a planned development. The density is determined on an overall basis. And that is consistent with what is allowed in the overlay district. The overlay district allows for density to be handled, to be spread across a larger area, and to not exactly conform to all other requirements. And then finally, I wanted to respond to Ms. Watt's comments, although I know they're not directly related to this. The Burr Oak area was identified for a storm sewer upgrade long before the city's municipal services property was ever redeveloped. As part of the redevelopment of the city's site, we did require the petitioner to significantly upsize the storm sewer that runs along Western Avenue. There is still work to be done in Burr Oak. completely unrelated, and that is a separate project that the city is pursuing, looking for funding for that project right now. And then finally, in the focus development, in that development on the Laurel and Western Avenue site, there are 12 affordable apartment units, as was required by the city council on that site. And the remainder of the units, I believe 20 units were required overall on that site. At the recommendation of the Housing Trust Fund Board, the city council did take payment for 8 of those units. That payment has gone into the city's housing trust fund and has allowed us to provide other types of affordable housing spread wider across the community. Chairman, those are all the responses I have.
Thank you. Then at this point, we will proceed to commission discussion and comment. And in the hopes of saving some time, I have prepared some remarks. The Plan Commission, as stated previously by Kathy Cerniak, is a recommending body to the City Council. When considering a petition, the Plan Commission is charged with striking a balance between the benefits to the whole community that the development may provide, while ameliorating valid concerns of adjacent neighbors and other nearby residents. Each petition is decided on its own merits and particular facts, and no petition sets a precedent for any future petition. In reviewing this specific petition for Phase 3, the final phase of the McKinley Road development, this commission at a prior meeting voted 6-0 to support a 3-story building. Now the petitioner, in response to comments from the HPC, has presented the commission with a 2-story building that does not require a height variance, has less building mass, and then more closely matches the architectural style of the existing Phase 1 and Phase 2 buildings. So in each case, he responded to issues raised by the HPC. Is this use compatible with the existing uses in the area? And since 2016, with the goal of the Plan Commission as supported to date by the City Council, our goal has been to remove commercial uses east of McKinley Road to create a more uniform residential buffer leading into the lovely single-family homes of East Lake Forest. Commercial uses in 3 older office buildings and a now demolished outbuilding have been replaced by 2 high-quality residential buildings that are adjacent to the existing residential uses in this area of the condominium building at 333 East Westminster and the Victorian residence at 351 East Westminster. Recommendation of this petition would complete the conversion of this area to residential uses. The suitability of the subject property for the purposes for which it is presently zoned. Alternative residential structures were considered, in fact, as early as 2016 and 2017, and I believe both Commissioner Artman Ruggles and Commissioner Freeman, I don't see at the moment, were involved in those discussions. And we looked at duplexes, we looked at townhomes, we were circling in on one single building because of the scale and the mass and the fact that these other building types created the need for greater impervious surface and more curb cuts. And they also, we wanted this development to meet the practical necessity of underrepresented building types in the area. And this condominium on McKinley in phases 1 and 2 and phase 3, if built, present a low density, single story, maintenance-free lifestyle that is preferred now, and it's underrepresented in our community. The proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it does benefit the community as a whole. Relative gains to the public include public open space. This space was placed adjacent to the library purposefully so that the library patrons, including parents, tots, and caregivers, would have convenient access to this park. In some of the correspondence we received from the public, they suggested that this was going to be locked off from the public, and that is not my understanding at all, that it would be open and available for public use. We also wanted to have a creation of a pedestrian-friendly environment with convenient access to the trains and the city's east side retail core, including Market Square, hoping to add new shoppers to the retail base. As all of you know, the walkability factor is very important to people today, and this represents an opportunity to be close to the train, close to the stores, still in the heart of town. Will property values be diminished by the proposed zoning change? Commercial use is being replaced with low-density residential units, and they found strong market acceptance. Phase 1 and 2 buyers include East Lake Forest Historic District residents that have relocated from their single-family homes to this condominium living. The 373 East Westminster lot to the east, though reduced in size, will still be nearly twice the required single-family minimum lot size. It will remain as R1 zoning and will remain within the East Lake Forest Historic District. Therefore, adjacent and nearby neighbors have the additional safeguard that any building designed for a new home at that location must pass the muster of the Historic Preservation Commission. Question was made by Commissioner Moorhead about health, safety, and general welfare. I specifically note the drainage and the traffic issues. The drainage, the third and final phase, as you heard from Mr. Whitmer, will include regrading both the phase 3 residential building, 373 East Westminster, and potentially help 385 East Westminster if that homeowner agrees. So that will address current drainage issues that do not originate on either one of the properties controlled by the developer. They do provide a benefit for the surrounding area. Even with the completion of phase 3, there will be less traffic in the area. There was a traffic study done early on, assuming 30 units. And particularly, we're seeing less commercial and transient traffic with the absence of the office buildings and also the Historic Society. As noted in that earlier traffic study, the new residences will generate significantly less traffic than the office buildings did. Another safety issue is that the alley cut-through road running from the library property to Westminster has been eliminated, and that will be an additional safeguard to the library patrons. The curb cuts have been reduced on McKinley. Now, one newly paved internal road provides ingress and egress for all 3 condominium buildings with no additional curb cuts on Westminster. We've had numerous discussions over several meetings about preserving the streetscape of East Westminster and having access to the underground parking within the McKinley Road development itself. And that is what phase 3 continues. There is a front lawn on East Westminster with phase 3. It's been preserved and enhanced with high quality landscaping by Mariani. And the northern facade of the new condominium building, which Mr. Whitmer did point out, matches the width of some of the surrounding buildings. It's still going to be softened by appealing landscaping, and they are going for more mature trees at the beginning. So there's less of a transition period on waiting for the trees to grow. The East Westminster streetscape will have more visual unity and balance with the beautifully restored historic residences on the northern side of the building, and will create a more fitting gateway, as Mr. McMahon of ULI indicated, for the entire East Lake Forest Historic District. Those 2 lots, as I've driven east on East Westminster, have always seemed disconnected from the surrounding homes because of the way they're set back and the low point of 373. And I see phase 3 as improving the overall visual effect and making the entire block more inviting. In summary, Completion of this third and final phase of the McKinley Road development provides significant gains to the community as a whole, while also addressing the valid concerns of nearby residents. There will be less traffic, better drainage, attractive front lawn landscaping, and an enhanced visual gateway to the East Lake Forest Historic District. Based upon these significant improvements, the completed development, in my opinion, based upon 5.5 years of attending and participating in these meetings and listening to many members of the public, this development should have no material adverse impact to the surrounding neighbors or to the East Lake Forest Historic District. Commissioner Douglas, do you have some comments?
Yes. First, I wondered if I could see the streetscape illustration again. I'd like to just expand a little bit on some questions that were asked earlier, some comments that were made earlier. Is that possible?
Chairman Kerr, are you okay if we bring the petitioner back in to respond to questions at this?
If not, I can just describe it.
I think it might be helpful to have the petitioner return.
Troy or Michelle, would you please bring Peter Whitmer back into the panel?
Sure, I'll take care of that.
A little bit different when it's not in the council chambers, when it's on Zoom.
Mr. Whitmer, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, while he's teeing that up, let me just preface what I'm gonna point out with the fact that the scheme that we approved back in December of 2019 unanimously was, actually in fairly close conformance with the master plan. The master plan showed a phase 3 building that didn't go any farther north than the north edge of building 1. And the building that we approved in December 19 went slightly farther north, but was also shifted north in order to create that green space by the library. And that was, I think, to me, that was the trade-off, that moving it closer to Westminster was balanced by the gain of that green space. Now that building, was obviously narrower than what we're looking at now. And I just wanted to, I think, to be fair in these comparisons that Peter went over before, if we look at, for instance, on the top, on the streetscape looking north at the top, whether it's 360 or 370, we're seeing different portions of those homes in different planes. I mean, the primary facade closest to us is drawn maybe a little heavier, and the lighter lines is the portion of the building behind. And here we're looking at the entire width of the building, all the way from, regardless of how far in depth the building component is. In contrast, when we look at 715 down below on the streetscape looking south, and we see 51.5 feet, we're ignoring the piece that's set back about 30 feet. It's to the right, and it's very faint. But when that's included, the building is over 70 feet. In the last petition, it was in the scheme in our packet, it was 83 feet wide. I believe now it's slightly less. It's 8 feet wide, 75 feet. So just to be fair, I wanted to point that out, that I think really we have a 75-foot wide building here, not 51.5. And by the way, I just want to say before I go on that my hat's off to the developer because they have just been over backwards responding to all the direction that they're getting from the public, from us, from HPC. And the problem has been, that a lot of the feedback has been conflicting. We approved a scheme back in December of 19 and then HPC shot it down. So the natural reaction was to try to find another solution. So thank you for that. I do want to just point out some differences between the current petition and what we did approve. Peter, if you don't mind bringing up the elevations. And while he's doing that, I'll point out that the building that we approved was 47 feet wide. And now it's 75 feet. It's 60% wider than what we approved. In addition, let's see. That's not the, let's see. Can you bring up the color version? Yeah. Well, that's still not the version that's in our packet. So it's a little hard to read, but the version in our packet shows the third story penthouses quite clearly. And these also aren't labeled as to which is which. Basically, if you go to the middle row, the two smaller elevations, the one on the left is the north elevation. And you can see very faintly the outline above the two-story elevation of a third story. That's the penthouse on the third floor, which in our packet is shown the same as the rest of the facade. And it's about 39 feet wide, scaling from the drawings. And it's located about 30 feet back, 31 feet back from the front facade. Now, given the fact that this building, the front facade has moved towards Westminster by 34 feet from the version that we approved, what we have here is a 39-foot wide mass at 3 stories that's actually closer to Westminster than it was on the 3-story version we approved. So it seems to me that from a massing perspective, as viewed from Westminster, this is more intrusive than what we approved in December 19, because not only have we kind of maintained that 3-story massing at that distance from Westminster, plus or minus 4 feet, in this case, closer to Westminster by 4 feet. Plus, in addition, we've widened it, so we have the 2 stories that are 60% wider. That's what's giving me pause. I want to approve this. I think that phase 3 is going to do well. It's a great scheme, but the scheme that we approved in December 19, I think was a much better transition from, and as the city council puts it, the transition from the higher density uses to the west to the single family homes in the historic district to the north and east, in the best possible way. I think the scheme we previously approved was better than this in regard to transition. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Freeman?
Thank you. So just a couple of, I think, clarifying comments for the record based on the standards that we're looking at. So, and some of the history. So, what we did at our last meeting was to send the zoning and the consolidation, the plot consolidation to City Council. As Kathy said, they could have accepted that recommendation, and then we wouldn't need to talk about anything else. And I think the concern that's been raised about whether we look at the LaSalle Sinclair factors or the ordinance, I think is really a distinction without a difference. I just didn't see the need to replow the same ground when not all of those factors, the eight factors for the LaSalle Sinclair factors, they're not all required. I mean, they're just things that are considered by courts. And if you look at the language of them, 1 through 5 of the LaSalle factors are all incorporated into the language of the ordinance, which I'm sure was the intent of the drafters when they did it. And then 6 through 8 are either partially in there or have certainly been part of these discussions for these many years. So I think we've addressed this. And I think, again, there was very detailed questioning around the ordinance. And so that was I raised that point of order. The other thing I would say about that is, again, assuming positive intent here, but you can't substitute the word essential for the word necessary. Right? This code has a meaning, and you can't then consult onto the common or the common vernacular the word necessary out of context. It's just not the way you're supposed to do things. The actual language is reasonably necessary, and in a legal context, reasonably necessary is not essential. It's not anything close to it. And so I think it's unfair to accuse city staff of misrepresenting and then take things out of context and try and change their definitions. Reasonably necessary is not essential. Reasonably necessary, if you look at Black's Law Dictionary, which I took a quick look at, specifically in the eminent domain, which is not, it's a higher standard, frankly, than what's here, but in such proceedings involving real estate and in weighing those interests, necessary means land reasonably requisite and proper for accomplishing an end in view, not absolute necessity of particular location. So I think the standard is clear as it relates to the zoning. And I don't know, I mean, Peter said that he'd be willing to, the petitioner would be willing to take a look at 30 as opposed to 38. It's not clear to me based on the comments thus far that will make any difference. And I wonder specifically based on the comments of Commissioner Artman Ruggles, that perhaps looking at that as 30 feet as opposed to 38 feet might actually complicate some of the issues that were raised. So I'm not sure that's a solution, but that's something that's out there, I think, for discussion. And when we look at it and we look at the zoning criterion, I think it's really important to look at these things again in context. The single family home that was part of the condominium buildings, whether it's still part of it or it's not, is not, I think, truly representative of the neighborhood. It will not even be as compliant as a transition as the single family home that's being proposed to be built on the 373 parcel once it's regraded. When we look at whether or not this adds value, I understand completely where Commissioner Douglas is coming from, that we did approve a 3-story, and we inevitably, if you're going to go from 3 stories to 2, you're going to have to adjust to some extent. And we may not agree on those adjustments. And ultimately, it's City Council's decision, I guess, to decide whether a 2-story transition is more appropriate than a 3. And based on the recitals that we've received from City Council, that certainly seems to be the direction. Paragraph B suggests that we follow the direction of previous actions by the City Council, which were based on recommendations from the Plan Commission and remain consistent with past deliberations of the Plan Commission. And in that regard, I think Chair Kerr brings up a couple of important points. I think if you go back and look at all of the meetings that we've had on this topic, and and because there's been a lot of talk about the master plan and this duplex single family home concept. If you went back and watched that meeting, you would see that there was a lot of discussion around those footprints. And it was clear that we were not approving footprints. We had, in fact, as Chair Kerr references, talked about a concept where you would have an entire row of townhomes and that you could then flip the townhome that faces Westminster and make it kind of look like a house and all of that, right? So, you know, we did look at the duplex idea. And frankly, I thought the duplex idea was silly because you end up pushing the building closer to Westminster by trying to accommodate this idea of that we were stuck with this footprint. We weren't. We were very specific about the idea that the master plan could be any number of things. We talked about townhomes because that was another way of saying that it is more of a transition. But from everything that I've heard, and particularly from the preservation group, you know, I frankly was surprised. I thought the 3-story was a nice transition as well. But if the direction from City Council is that a 2-story building rather than a 3 is presented as an opportunity because of this zoning change and provides an appropriate transition, you know, I think that's what we're being asked to review. We're not being asked to go through 8 factors, all of which are not necessary or mandatory. And I don't think we're being asked to interrogate staff on language that isn't in the code. And as far as the code goes, you know, it's public health, safety, or general welfare. It's not all of them. I mean, we have to look at this concept in its entirety. And I think that's part of the problem that this has gone on so long, is that I think we've got this recency bias. We're losing sight of the work that was done, the deliberations that were done by the Plan Commission in the past, the discussions that actually occurred. And there's been language thrown about that this hasn't been considered, this wasn't reviewed fully, without going back and looking at the meetings. Because I think if you went back and looked at the meetings, you would see that. And that is part of the record that's here before us. And that is part of, frankly, what the parties relied on. And they made decisions based on this commission's past advice and the actions of City Council. So I think it's unfair to now talk about phase 3 as if phase 1 and 2 have nothing to do with phase 3. They do. I mean, this was a planned development, and we looked at the entire corridor when those decisions were made. So I would just urge everyone to kind of think about not just what has been done in the past and respect for those decisions, but the real impact that they have on investments that were made, right? And exposure to the city by not following what had been done in the past and what people reasonably relied on when they made investments into this development. Speaking to all of the various the zoning and the other also for the special use, you know, I think I'm having difficulty with the record in this matter in a couple of instances. First, the petition, I already discussed this at the last meeting. I didn't look at all 1,200 signatures, but I looked at several hundred, and they're not all Lake Forest residents. And I think the representation was that fully 1/3 of the city of Lake Forest is against this development. Even if we were to assume 1,200 is that they were all residents, which they're not. I think by my count, I know when I moved into the city of Lake Forest 2 decades ago, population was over 20,000. I think currently we're around 19, but you know, whatever. More importantly, the petition doesn't really speak to any of the factors that we're supposed to review from either the zoning or the special use. So I have difficulty giving weight to that when I read the language in it as to what people actually signed on to. And then I have difficulty when you can't substantiate who those people are. But as to the record, I have difficulty with the proposition that having a new single family home with improved grading that improves not just the subject property to the east, but also the one to the south and the ones that carry through past there. And looking at the overall development, even if we take into account the additional land that faces McKinley, right, and how that was incorporated into it, I think that led to a much more balanced streetscape. And again, if the direction here is that a two-story building is a better transition, I think the current plan, maintaining all of the setbacks, all of the other characteristics of a single family home in the area, it being new construction, improved as it relates to the entire area. And then also don't forget that by moving this building closer to Westminster in the first instance, we created a public mirror to Market Square, which backs up to the library. And again, that's a public welfare kind of a concern. There was a lot of discussion around that. So we can't have it all. I mean, I think that's really my bottom line on this. And I do think the petitioner has worked really hard to follow the direction of City Council, make appropriate changes where they can, provide as much green space facing Westminster as possible. As I see it right now, the greenscape and the front of this condo building extends all the way to the back of the home that will be in between the condo buildings. So it's not going to be sandwiched between condo buildings. It's going to have green space entirely to the east. And so when I look at all those things and I look at the factors for both the zoning and the special use, I think this is a vast improvement to all of the things that the plan, and the committee that was set up to look at this cultural corridor. I think it meets those objectives. I think it's just wrong to suggest that we are stuck with the footprints on the master plan. That was never the intent of the Plan Commission, and that was never what was relied upon by the petitioner. I may have other comments later, but that's, I think, largely my view on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Artman-Ruggles? The third person who was there from the beginning?
I was, and phase 3 has changed considerably from the initial master plan that we originally looked at, which did have a single family or duplex fronting Westminster and then a multifamily behind that. And conceptually, that would have been a transition to the single family residences to the east. But over the course of the past year, the development has increased in scope. I mean, both the footprints of phase 2 and phase 3 have been enlarged from that master plan that we originally saw. So now when I look at an aerial of the proposal, the multifamily now extends far to the east than the other buildings on that lot would have typically. So when I look at it, the extent of this development is almost as wide as Market Square from, Market Square to Forest Avenue. So in effect, the development is extending, much deeper than what we traditionally see as this one deep parcel footprint along McKinley Road. I think it's extending further east than actually the library building itself. And that gives me concern because it doesn't seem to me that we're transitioning to this single family residential as much as I had initially thought to begin with. From the very beginning, I had concerns about the building mass, the height, and the compatibility with the neighboring homes. We had given them direction to modify the design that faced Westminster to be more compatible with the streets and scaling and detailing. And the elevation that was presented tonight, it just doesn't seem very residential to me. It's a 39-foot tall wall facing Westminster. Doesn't, conjure up an image of single-family residential transitional architecture. And as a matter of fact, HPC, agreed that, the massing and the height was problematic. So at this point, I just don't feel that the petition is meeting the master plan recommendations that, encouraged building massing that was, respectful of the community and that provided a transition from the multifamily to the single story residences. And I also don't really feel that the development has provided enough buffers between the condominium building and the buildings to the east. I do appreciate that 8 more feet was taken off of the petition that was originally presented, but overall this, phase 3 is much wider than the development footprint that we initially saw. And I know that the development wasn't set in stone, but we were shown site plans of development that would have fit into the parcel that they originally had. And as soon as they were able to get more land, everything stretched, became even more dense and larger. So at this point, I'm just not very supportive of phase 3.
Thank you, Commissioner Moorhead.
Thank you. Just to sum up my prior questions, it appears that the rezoning fails, and as a result, under the applicable law, the special use and the plat of consolidation are moot because you can't do a multi-unit condo in an R1 zone. That being said, I'll go through the rezoning briefly and then just touch on the special use because the City Council asked us to. On the rezoning, going through the criteria, 75% of the surrounding property is in the R1 and those uses are residential. So that's the predominant use in that area. The property in question, it's been a single family home residential use since 1963. And prior to that, it was part of the house, the property at 401, which according to the records, it was dated in 1928. So it's 93 years, it's been residential. And the petitioner himself or his affiliated entities or colleagues purchased the 373 single family home for a value of around, what did I say, $437 a square foot. It's a sizable amount. They demonstrated that property as a single family home has value. And granted, they did not buy, he had acknowledged he did not buy it with any option to seek zoning approvals. There was no, he bought it as a single family home in the R1. The property is very suitable for single family home residential. The trend of development in the East Lake Forest area, from turning single family homes into multi-family condos, there isn't one. The last one was Ferry Hall. I think in the last meeting in January, I called it Perry Hall, but it's Ferry Hall,
Sure.
My mistake. That was an adaptive reuse of historical buildings on historical property. And I believe that sale to the developer then was around 1977. So it's 43 years ago. We do not have a trend of development in the general area of the property in question. And the property in question is the 7,225 square feet in the R1 historic district. With respect to the public health, safety, or general welfare, with respect to the potential of a multifamily condo on this 7,225 square feet, the health issue is, I don't know if there really is one. Safety, if you change it from R1 single family home to GR3 multifamily condo, traffic density will go up, traffic will go up. That's reality. It will increase the traffic. That's a safety issue. The general welfare, The drainage, as I recall, in December of 2019, the city engineer was working with the 373 property owner, and the drainage issues were going to be addressed. I think there was going to be some temporary drainage remediation, maybe with a swale of some sort. Maybe that was with the Peter and the petitioner. But as I recall, I don't recall that as a big red flag like 373 is virtually unusable and the property, the improvements on the property have to be torn down to make the drainage work. I recall that as being an issue that could be addressed and ameliorated. Again, with the general welfare, the size of this building as it fronts onto Westminster, it's going to be an eyesore and it will have a jarring effect to the neighborhood. If you walk from McKinley down Westminster to the east, by literally, if you're out the sidewalks on the north side, if you're on the north side, it's the second tree in from McKinley is when you realize you are in a different area than McKinley. You're lower in elevation, there's less traffic, there's more trees, you're entering a residential area. It's a different feel. And if you have the home at 351 Westminster, and then you have the massing of this building directly east of it, it will have a jarring effect. And that building, I walked that whole area, you will be able to see that building from Church in Westminster, so the far end of Church of the Holy Spirit, and you will be able to see it from Wisconsin and Western over on the other side of the tracks. It will be noticeable in the landscape of downtown Lake Forest, in the residential area as well. With respect to the general welfare, we're providing a need of condos. There are other condos in Lake Forest. There were 56 sales in the last 12 months. There are people selling condos. I know there's a market for it, but there's condos for sale, and there's 16 on the market now. And I think all this goes to the fact that I can touch on this in a minute with the special use, but actually, I'm gonna hold that comment. And then with respect to the rezoning, I do want to note that the staff report said on whether property values will be diminished by the zoning regulation. It said that there's no documentation to submitted to demonstrate development will diminish values, but the petitioner did not submit any documentation showing the opposite of that. I might have commented on that in prior meetings, but it seems like the application is proving its point by saying no one has shown otherwise, and it seems like a very odd way of proving a criteria. Again, I think I may have touched on this, but the property, the 373 property was not vacant, and it was never abandoned, and was fully operational as a single family. I think that's correct, an important point under the applicable law. And then on the special use, some of these are duplicative of the rezoning, but I think it's important to note, we did approve special use for the phase 3 property in December of 2019, and we did that. So in my mind, I'm bifurcating the phase 3 property and the 7,225 square feet for this special use, because I'm personally okay with the development going on the phase 3. It's a question of whether we expand that into this strip of land. And again, I don't know if the health, safety, welfare under the special use, section 159.045 of the code, it's the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. I don't think those points have been made for the reasons I previously stated. And I'm going through these, not because I particularly enjoy this, but because the city council asked, so I'm just summarizing these points. I think I've touched that it will be will have injury to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, and it could substantially diminish and impair property values. Another point is the special use will not negatively affect the overall character of the area. Well, will in this residential area, which is on the 7,225 square foot part, 75% of the surrounding area is residential. And then another point, the last point for the special use for me, the exterior architectural appearance and functional plan of any proposed structure will not be incompatible with the character of the applicable district so as to cause a substantial depreciation in the property values within the neighborhood. I don't think that point's been proven by the petitioner. And just saying that no one else has come forward disproving that point, it doesn't seem that they've satisfied the criteria. So in sum, it seems to fail the rezoning, and I'm not inclined to support it. As a result, under the law, the special use and the plat of consolidation are moot points. For the purposes of advising the city council, I would be supportive of the special use on the phase 3 parcel, like we voted in support of in December 2019, not on the strip, 38-foot wide, 7,225 square foot strip. I think the issue is that, so we were supportive of the special use on the phase 3 parcel at 3 stories. HPC came in and said, well, 3 stories is a little tall. I don't think the HPC ever supported a 2-story building, but my feeling from reading the minutes is that that's a possibility that they might be inclined to support that. I don't think that's been pursued fully. So I think that's where we are. The 2 commissions advising the city council have come out and said, more or less, a 2-story condo building on the phase 3 parcel is acceptable. I know the HPC hasn't said that, but it sounded like they might be able to say that if they discuss it. I know Peter, the petitioner, said that he said in November 14th of 2019, a 2-story condo with underground parking and an elevator is not economically viable. And I'm assuming he's going to say the same thing today. If I asked him, I won't, but he said that in November 2019, and it seems like the 900-pound gorilla in the room is the economic issue, and that in order to build the structure, the improvement that the Plan Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission and the general public are in support of, or generally in support of, because I know that everyone has their own opinions, is not economically viable. So it becomes an economic issue, which is a political issue, which is a city council issue. So that's kind of where I stand with things. I'm not in support of the rezoning. Those are my thoughts on the special use. And I think that's probably where this is or should be headed, is back to the city council to review the economics of the overall phase 3 development. That's all I have.
We're not in the chamber, so it's a little hard to have a discussion, but your issue on the drainage, I would ask Kathy on that. I believe that it was not discovered until fairly recently, the source of the water that was coming down onto these properties. Is that accurate?
The impact on the 373 property is from the south. There was a swale put in along the west side of the city property, but it did not solve the drainage issues. The city engineer was out there. I was out there during heavy storms. Clearly the water is coming from the south. So there is, in fact, the owners of that property made the case to the Historic Preservation Commission a number of years ago that the integrity of the structure was compromised, and the demolition was approved, but they never proceeded.
And HPC has authority over granting height variances, which I presume is the main reason that, given the reaction from HPC, the developer then went to a 2-story. I open to comments. I mean, I can go on to the next person, but if there's anyone who has any comments following along from what Commissioner Moore had raised, it might be a good time to discuss.
I guess I have more of a question. The what the Historic Preservation Commission looked at was the 3-story building that this commission voted out unanimously, right?
Correct.
So we have one advisory body saying this is acceptable, the other advisory body saying it's not, right? They're both advisory. I don't know how you would weight those. I'll leave that to the city council, but I don't know that going back through, it would be different if we could say, well, alternatively, we still like the 3-story building, let's go ahead with that. I don't think that changes city council's deliberations here, right? It's already, the Historic Preservation Commission has already said no. So they have conflicting, to Commissioner Moorhead's point, conflicting advisory opinions. So I don't know that that's an option, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. I think we have to either say that this 2-story building, which is what it seems like city council wants, is acceptable, or it isn't, and then it's up to city council. I don't know that it goes back to Historic Preservation Commission again, does it? I mean, it seems like a futile effort.
Depending on your vote tonight, we will need to discuss process, but as I said earlier, I do think a vote on the zone changes requested, on the special use permit that is in front of you, I think both of those votes are important. If as a third vote, for the council's benefit, you want to take an advisory vote to re-endorse the phase 3 or I guess, or the 3-story, but I guess that's not needed because you've already voted 6-0 in support of that. Never mind.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of my point, is I think we're past that. And so, you know, now it's an issue of, is it 2 or is it 3? And then what does 2 look like? And, you know, again, from the zoning perspective of it, we're not rezoning the entire parcel, taking it out of R1 usage. What I understand the petition to be suggesting is you would maintain that and all of the setbacks associated with it. Any proposal would have to be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. And I think the record does include evidence that the Donovans did try and sell this property before as a single family home outside of this potential benefit to this larger project, and they were unable to do so.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that that's clear in the record.
No, Chairman, I have a few comments too.
Yes, Commissioner Atherson, please.
So I was the one that was not present at that one vote. So that's why it was 6-0, and you might have gotten a different vote if I was there. But anyways, I had prepared remarks basically following the recommendations of City Council that we reviewed the LaSalle Sinclair factors. And I won't go into detail because I think Commissioner Moorhead really covered a lot of what I was going to say, and also Commissioner Artman Ruggles did too. So, but basically, in terms of the zoning change and the compatibility with existing uses and zoning of surrounding properties, as I had said before, I think the transition from GR to GR3 to R1 begins really at 351 Westminster. Because you're going from a 3-story condo at 333 to a single family home at 341. And that transition could continue down to instead of going back up to a 3-story condo and then to single family home, you should continue the transition. I really consider this building a 3-story because it has living space on the roof, and people will be living there, you know, using that as living space. So, you know, the proposed condo building is really incompatible with the existing single family homes and the streetscape on Westminster. I mean, we keep talking about, you know, the buildings on McKinley and how this is a McKinley development, but that's 2 separate streetscapes that have very different characteristics. And I think it's really incompatible in terms of the mass and the density, the height, the style on Westminster is not, this proposed building is more of a commercial institutional look as opposed to a residential look. And, the activity level is going to be a lot busier than what the character on Westminster is. So the incompatibility is what I'm worried about, but which also would impact the property values, I think, of the single family homes on Westminster in terms of increased traffic and noise, the decreased privacy that a lot of the neighbors will face when you have a living space on the third floor of a condo, and the density of the area. So I'm not going to keep going down the list of the LaSalle Sinclair points, but basically what I think it is it's just an inappropriate development for the Westminster neighborhood with the Westminster streetscape. And I would say that it's inappropriate to rezone it to accommodate a larger building that does not really fit into the streetscape. And that would go with the same thing with the special use permit. I think it has some of the same kind of compatibility issues that I don't think it meets those standards. I could go through those and enumerate them as a city council asked us to, but I think we're all tired, and I think we've talked it through pretty well here. But I am not in support of, the rezoning, and not in support of the special use. And because I also think with the master plan, we really need to stick to that idea. I know it might not be economically viable for Peter and Todd, but we have to pay attention to our historic streetscapes and not disrupt them. People buy their homes there because of that character of that neighborhood. And really what's most appropriate might not be the most economically viable for them, but it might be the best thing for our community. So I would really like them to revisit, or another developer to revisit, what the master plan laid out on this area, which it would be a single family home and a duplex facing Westminster. So those are all my comments.
Any other comments from commissioners? Then I will respond, Commissioner Athenson. We went back and forth, I think, before you joined the board. And there was concern about the scale of a duplex and the fact that you'd have to have curb cuts onto Westminster because it's not really part of the other buildings. And we tried townhomes, and here again, it was just taking up a lot of land. We're going to have separate driveways, more impervious surface. That led us to one building. And I'm just not sure that going back to a duplex. The other issue was, would somebody want to buy a duplex right there like that? Or would they prefer to be in a condo building, brick, and part of this community? But I probably agree. I mean, I don't think we're going to reach the consensus that we had on the 3-story.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
I want to make sure everyone understands what I was saying, because Commissioner Athenson, I don't think, picked up. It's not just people up on the roof. This 39-foot structure that I mentioned is it's an interior. It's a building on the roof. It's a 3rd story. It's 39 feet wide. It has French doors. It has windows. I don't know exactly what goes on in there, but it is probably associated with the roof deck. Anyway, so we have the 3rd story. Granted, it's not covering the whole footprint, but you see that width from Westminster. And the other thing is that we've, the scheme we approved was 95 feet back from Westminster setback, and now we're 61 feet. So 2 stories or 3, the impact to me is, is worse here with this scheme. I keep going back to, okay, so we can't get, somebody said economically viable. It's not economically viable. I just wonder, at what point does the developer go to the city and say, it looks like everyone wants a 2-story scheme, but it's got to be a smaller footprint, so therefore the land price has to change, and then we have a deal. Number 2, it'd be great if our process had some mechanism by which Plan Commission could somehow have a brainstorming session with HPC to figure out where the meeting point is. It's really going to be difficult with this process, the back and forth, and I don't know how you get there with this process. It's food for thought. Thanks.
And the Open Meetings Act as well, Commissioner Douglas, that's the problem.
Sorry, what?
The Open Meetings Act and what those prohibitions against those kinds of collaborative sessions, you know, it makes perfect sense from a business perspective, but it's not the way the government wants to run it. So
We used to have workshops with HPC, didn't we, Kathy, where we would go over these issues. When I was on HPC or BRB, one of the two, we had
I
workshops.
think there was a liaison, right? There's one person who does it.
No, there was workshops we had where people weren't, the public was invited.
There can be workshops, but again, the city can't be designing, the city does have to react to the petition that is presented before us. To put together a group of 15 people who are going to design the building, I'm not sure that's workable, but we can certainly foster some of those discussions. But again, today we have what we have in front of us as a result of the numerous meetings, and I do think it's appropriate for you to take action so the city council can give some clear direction to the developer at this point.
One last question, if I could then, Kathy. You know, that space in front of what was at the time structurally unsound building on the city property at the back end of it, that front end of the property was its own lot, right? Did anybody ever come to the city and say, I want to build a duplex or a single family home on that?
While the Historic Society was there, or where
Right.
that, no, but we also didn't put a for sale sign.
You didn't market it, right?
It was essentially a single zoning lot because of the placement of that building.
Oh, okay. So it really wasn't dividable in the first
It was 2 PIN numbers, 2 tax parcels, but we considered it to be a single zoning lot. And it was all non-conforming because that structure was affiliated with, it was a coach house to an estate house.
I see. Okay.
But the developer's point on needing the zoning change was particularly for the underground parking, which is a requirement of the city for this development. And it certainly appears he wouldn't have space otherwise.
It'd be a pretty steep ramp if they wanted to position it the way we asked them to. And I think that was part of the discussion that came out of moving the two buildings into one. If there's no further discussion, I'd make a motion.
Please do.
I'll actually break this into 2 separate motions. So we'll start with similar to the motion that was passed last time, with a significant distinction around the 30-foot as opposed to 38-foot wide parcel. And I'll connect to that, as I did last time, the recommendation for the approval of the plat of consolidation. So with that lead in, I would move that based on the findings in the staff report and further discussed during this meeting related to the 5 factors included in the code related to zoning, that we recommend approval of a zone change from R1 single family residence to GR3 general residence for only the approximately 30-foot wide parcel to the east of phase 3, with an effective date only upon consolidation of the strip of land with the larger phase 3 property, and subject to final approval of the phase 3 development. So that includes the consolidation, plat of consolidation.
Shall we vote on these one at a time in separate motions?
I think so.
Then do I hear a second? I'll second. so that we will have a vote on the record. Michelle, would you please call the roll?
Yes, I will.
We need to give good feedback to the city.
Commissioner Athenson,
Nay.
Commissioner Douglas,
Nay.
Commissioner Artman Ruggles,
Nay.
Commissioner Moorhead,
Nay.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
and Chairman Kerr.
Aye.
2 yeas, 4 nays.
All right, and then to close it out, I would recommend approval of a special use permit approving phase 3 of the McKinley Road planned multifamily development and the site plan as presented based on the findings in the staff report addressing each of the factors outlined in the code, recognizing that the plan is in substantial conformance with the master plan and redevelopment recommendations as previously recommended by the Plan Commission and accepted by the City Council.
Is there a second? Well, I will second again. Michelle, will you please call a roll?
Yes, Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Moorhead,
Nay.
Commissioner Athenson,
Nay.
Commissioner Artman Ruggles,
Nay.
Commissioner Douglas,
Nay.
and Chairman Kerr.
Aye.
2 yeas, 4 nays.
Now, the plat of consolidation would then include the zoning, the 30-foot
Correct, that was
piece being
included.
requested.
Yeah, that was included in the first motion.
Oh, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, there was discussion of the effective date only upon consolidation of the strip of land with the
Right,
larger
okay.
phase 3 property. So
Right.
that's the approval of the plat
Okay.
consolidation, right? Is that clear enough, Kathy, or do we need a separate
Yes,
motion?
no,
Because you do have it separate.
Yes, she did. I kind of merged them.
Okay.
That is clear enough, and we can
Okay.
take
Because-
the recommendation forward, but I appreciate you concluding this tonight so we can give the petitioner a clear sense of where the city is on this.
Right, and I appreciate all the views expressed by members of the public and members of the commission. We'll see how City Council approaches it. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Now, can I get a second for that?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Michelle, do we need to take a roll call on that? All right. All in favor, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you. Night.